Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training we are going to be going over the overview of your training module. This is going to be a super exciting training because a lot of the pieces that we have been talking about are going to further come together inside of this training. So obviously we are continuing our theme in this module of putting your transformation program together, and one piece of that transformation program is the actual trainings, and that's exactly what we are going to be talking about inside of this specific training. Now, I do want to go ahead and emphasize something before we get started here, is that I want you to know is that our understanding of creating an amazing transformation product and training modules has come from a very simple principle that you are already familiar with, which is that skill equals knowledge times reps. And so our skill of knowing how to be able to create an amazing transformation product has come from us learning and then going ahead and taking action, aka repetition, a bunch of times. And so we have implemented and took action over many years, and we have put in the reps. However, those reps would have only been possible from the knowledge that we had learned. And so that is why we want to go ahead and give credit where credit is due, is that there are so many people throughout the last decade that have influenced our understanding on topics like transformation and coaching and how to be able to create an amazing transformation product and really just an amazing product as a whole, okay? And so credit to Dr. Trevor Kashey, Huggy McNiff, Carrie Peters, Dr. Lane Norton, Alex Hormozi, Sam Ovens, Stacey Morgenstern, Anthony Robbins, Dan Martell, Dr. Andrew Huberman, and so many others that honestly, at this point, I've forgotten how many people that we have learned from, how many amazing people that we've learned from. And so I did just want to go ahead and give credit where credit is due, is that so many of these concepts, what we ended up doing was that we learned from so many different coaches and mentors and sources over the years, and then what we did is we built upon them ourselves inside of our own remote wellness practice, okay? So I can't cite specifically, right, exactly what concept we got from who, and then we went ahead and developed it and all that kind of stuff over the years. However, that's why I did want to go ahead and dump as many sources as possible, because at the end of the day, I want you to know this, is that we were not born knowing this stuff, okay? All we did is that we stood on the shoulders of giants that came before us. We had amazing mentors and we had amazing coaches ourselves, and then what we did is we took massive action and we put in the repetition to be able to learn and innovate ourselves. And so ultimately, that is the introductory note that I did want to go ahead and put, is that I do want you to go ahead and alleviate some of your imposter syndrome when you see this finished, finalized product, right? You see all of this that we're talking about and you're like, man, there's no way that I can pull off any of this. I just feel it's completely out of my capability. Well, I just want you to know what you're seeing is the result of many years of sticking with it, of hard work, of putting in the action. And you can 100% also get to this point, if not even more than this point, but as long as you continue to put in the work. And so that is the reminder not to judge your chapter 1 to our chapter 8, all right? Now, having said that, let's go ahead and hop into this specific training. Of course, we do have the training outline available for you inside of the guide for future reference. And let's go ahead and without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the actual training. So the very first question that you might have is, well, what are training modules? And that's an excellent question. So like we spoke about in the previous RWA training, we talked about your transformation product, right? And we said that training refers to anything that is your yellow brick road, the curriculum or the path that is going to take your student to their desired situation, right? And so remember, this is very important to remember. I'm going to keep on saying this over and over and over again. You're going to get tired of me saying this, is that training is just one piece of what facilitates the transformation of the student, right? It goes along with community, it goes along with support, it goes along with the entire experience, the intangibles of your entire transformation program, right? So don't forget, even though we are just zooming in to the component of training, it does not mean that training in and of itself is the entire transformation product, okay? So that's what we refer to when we talk about training. But similarly, like we talked about in that previous training, we also said that training is not always what you think, is that training in the one-on-one model could refer to a one-on-one Zoom call. Training could be an online classroom like the one that you're going through right now. It could be an in-person workshop. It all of a sudden includes all of the things like content, training modules, coaching calls, one-on-one sessions, training portal, resources and activities. All of these things could also be considered training. And so what you need to know about this is that because training is not just one thing, that means that how we define training inside of our remote wellness practice is going to change depending on what level of the evolution of an RWP we are in. And so when we are in the one-on-one transformation model, our training is going to look different than when we are in the hybrid transformation model. Okay, so in the one-on-one model, because we are working on getting the practice, the experience, and the reps, right, what's going to happen is that when you are in the one-on-one model, your training is going to take the form of weekly one-on-one calls, okay? But do not forget, again, I said you're going to get tired of this, is that you are not selling weekly one-on-one calls. The training is just one piece of your entire transformation product. And so in this specific RWA training, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and walk you through our recommendation of what has worked for us and what we have seen work time and time again in the one-on-one level of your first 90-day transformation product. Okay, so that's what we're going to do inside of this training. I'm going to walk you through the training modules, the sequence of them, and how it looks like, so that way you understand, okay, for my first 90-day transformation product, this is what the training sequence is going to look like. Beautiful. Now, having said that, let's go ahead and hop over and talk about a couple quick mentions in regards to your training module. So before we actually get into the overview of the recommended training modules for your first 90-day transformation program, or at least how they're going to be structured for module 5 and for your practice calls, what we want to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and talk about a couple quick questions and answers in regards to your training module, so that way you can go ahead and have these answered as well. Okay, so question number 1, how many training modules are going to be inside of my first transformation program? So our recommendation is to make your signature flagship program a 90-day program, which is a 12-week program to start with, okay? So you are going to have 12 training modules, one for each week. That is question number 1 answered. Question number 2, what do we call our training modules? Okay, so when starting out in the one-on-one model, we recommend calling your training modules coaching calls because it's the term that would be most understandable for everyone, right? If you go out there and say, hey, this is going to be trainings, all of a sudden training in the one-on-one model sounds a lot more kind of like a lot more work that's involved with it, right? And so what we're doing is we're just labeling our trainings as coaching calls. But don't forget, trainings doesn't have to be trainings in the way that you think of training. I'm going to be using the word training a lot inside of this specific training. There you go, right? And so what we did is we decided to stay away from the word session because too many people think that sessions are what they are purchasing in the program, and the word sessions gives the calls too much importance. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to give less importance to the training calls, so that way people didn't overhype them too much, right? So if we called them training calls, people are like, oh, you know, this is going to be like a very, very, very big, important thing. And then if we call them sessions, people are like, oh, I'm purchasing packages per session. And so we stayed away from the word trainings and sessions, so that way we could understand, wait a second, you know what? The coaching calls are just a piece of the entire transformation program. Okay, now 2 quick notes about this specific question. Note number 1, this is different than support coaching calls. So you can imagine, right, we have the classroom in RWA, we have our classroom with our trainings, and then we have our weekly support coaching calls. So even though we're calling them coaching calls in the one-on-one model, it's not to be confused with support coaching calls that might happen in a group setting via the student community, kind of like how we have it in RWA. Okay, so I know the terms are going to kind of jumbled together, but over time with repetition, you'll understand that, okay, when it's a one-on-one model, the terms are different than when it's a hybrid model, the terms are different. Okay, so that's note number 1. Note number 2 is that inside of this training, you might sometimes hear me interchangeably use the word coaching call number 3 and training number 3. Both of them mean the same thing, but I'm just using them in different contexts, so that's why I go ahead and use the different terms. And so that is the answer to the question in regards to what do we call our training modules, okay? Question number 3 is how long is each coaching call actually going to be? The answer to this is that usually the coaching calls, the ones that you do with your students, are going to be around 45 minutes. Sometimes they will extend into 60 minutes when you're starting out because you're still learning, but typically 45 minutes is the usual coaching call time, okay? That is question number 3 that I did want to go ahead and address, all right? Question number 4, scared, nervous, or uncomfortable. I do want to go ahead and talk to you about 2 quick reframes that you can install for yourself as you start to learn more about this, okay? So scared, nervous, uncomfortable, Good. Because as we start to go into the overview of these 12 coaching calls, you're going to notice that yes, there's excitement, but then at the same time, you're labeling some of this kind of like fear and nervousness and comfortability as a problem. Okay. So what I'm urging you to do is I would urge you to stop beating yourself up and judging yourself because you think that you shouldn't feel this way. Okay. And I would urge you to watch the words like should, must, have to, because whenever you use those words in your vocabulary, what that implies is that there is some sort of expectation. It came from someone else. And so I would urge you to really just rid of your entire speech patterns of these words should, must, have to. All of this implies expectation, all right? Because the feelings that you're going to have around scared and nervousness and uncomfortability, those are all completely normal. I want you to accept that it's an inevitable fact of the process. The emotions that you are feeling are normal and natural. The problem is when you start to label those feelings as problems. And so it's not that the feelings and the emotions are the problem, it's the labeling is what is the problem, not the emotions themselves. Make sense? And so I would urge you to go ahead and make that mental shift reframe, okay? The feelings are normal, embrace them, stop judging them, stop shaming yourself for having them, okay? And be happy that you are actually having those emotions. Why? Because it means that you're actually starting something new and you're starting something exciting. That's actually a good thing, all right? That's number one, and that's reframe number one that I wanted to go ahead and share with you right before we actually get into the 12 coaching calls and the explanation for them, all right? Reframe number two around this entire topic of being uncomfortable is that skill equals knowledge times reps. Of course, it's going to feel foreign and uncomfortable for you right now. You've never done it before. As I show you these 12 calls, you're going to be like, oh boy, I don't know if I'm ready to be able to deliver this to a student. Yeah, congratulations, you're normal. And so skill equals knowledge times reps. And so when you haven't had any reps because you're getting the knowledge right now, you're not going to have the skill. And when you don't have the skill, it is going to be uncomfortable. And so if you think about it, it's kind of dumb to think that this should, there's that should word again, remember, this should feel comfortable for me when I've never done it before. What the heck? Where are you getting this expectation from? And so the truth is that once you've walked yourself and enough students through each of your training modules, that is at the point that it's going to start feeling easier for you. It's going to start feeling more comfortable for you. But at the end of the day, do not let the emotions that you have between where you are right now and getting to the point where you have the skill, all those emotions that you have in between, don't let that stop you from doing the only thing that is actually going to help you alleviate those emotions. And what is the only thing that is going to help you alleviate those emotions? Action. So always remember, action alleviates anxiety. This is very, very, very important to know. Okay, so closing note on this, remember, these reframes will mean nothing unless you actually rewire your default thinking patterns by putting this in your becoming journal and arguing with yourself on a daily basis. Until you actually argue with yourself, if you're feeling nervous and you're like, hey, I just want to quit. If you're feeling uncomfortable and you're like, hey, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not going to continue this program no more because it's too much for me. Well, if you actually go ahead and argue with yourself every single day using these reframes, only then will you be able to rewire your default thinking patterns. Okay. And then of course, we're going to talk more about this in the imposter syndrome training later on inside of this module. But I did want to just go ahead and touch on this briefly here because I know that at this point, this is where a lot of students start to self-sabotage and they really start to kind of get too scared and too nervous to continue. So that's why I did want to just go ahead and address it now. All right, next up, what we're going to go ahead and talk about is going to be your practice training module. So right here, before we actually get into the overview of what your practice training modules are going to look like, I do want to go ahead and pre-frame and preface exactly what this entire module is going to be like and whether or not you are going to be taking the training modules and the templates and the scripts that we provide. Are those going to exactly be what you give to your students? Well, let me go ahead and answer that for you right now, okay? Because the entire structure of your modules that we are going to be giving you inside of this specific training, right? Inside of this training here in a second, we're going to walk you through a structure of your modules. Well, all of that entire structure that we're going to walk you through inside of this training is what we call your practice training modules. Why practice? Because here's the thing. Most RWA students who are just starting out, who are beginners, who are working to become RWPs like yourself, the truth is that probably you have never, or you have rarely ever spoken to someone from the frame of being a remote coach. You've never taken somebody through a transformation program before, right? That's the reason why you are inside of this program. And so because of that, there is going to be a training period that is required for you to be able to build up your own confidence. So many times we hear RWA students talk about imposter syndrome, and they think that that is a problem, when in reality, like we've talked about many times before, it's not the fact that you have imposter syndrome that is the problem. The problem is that you label it and you judge it, because the truth is that it's completely normal to feel like an imposter right now, to have a lack of confidence right now because you've never done it before. And so the purpose of the practice calls and the practice training modules and the practice curriculum that you are going to be going through inside of this module is to give you the training wheels for you to be able to get the practice talking to someone out loud about the topics that are going to be inside of the practice coaching calls. Now, you might have a question. You might say, hey, but Coach Yasin, why not just let us create our own scripts and training modules from the very beginning? Why even walk us through these, practice modules and these practice scripts? And why give us any of that? Why not just from the very beginning allow us to go out there and create our own scripts and our own training modules? Why do we have to do all of this practice from the very beginning? And I would say that's a very good question. And that's why I want to go ahead and talk to you right now about the two options that we had, okay? Because we've spent a long time trying to figure out the best way to be able to set up a beginner for success inside of this industry. And over the years, honestly, we have tried many different things, okay? We've experimented with giving students complete freedom. Hey, we said, hey, here's the framework. Go out there and, put everything together for yourself so that way you have the customization. We've experimented with giving students all of the templates and telling them to follow exactly what it is that we tell them to follow, right? So that way they had less freedom, but that way they had more structure. And literally we have practiced everything in between there as well. We've tried it all, okay? But at the end of the day, when designing this curriculum, we had mainly two options, okay? Option number one was literally recommending a DIY approach. So what we would do is we would give you the frameworks and the templates and the overall kind of structure, but then we wouldn't tell you word for word what to say inside of the coaching calls. We would have you go out there and make your own scripts, right? We tried that. And the pro of that was that it had customization, but the con of that is that there was a significant amount of upfront work that was required by the RWA student, because you had to go out there and create your own training modules, even though we were providing for you kind of like the template, the framework, but you still had to go out there and create your own training modules scripts before you could actually go ahead and practice, right? And so what would end up happening was that it was just way too difficult for most beginners. And then there was option number two, which was a DFY approach, a done for you approach, right? And in this approach, we give you ready-made scripts for coaching calls for you to be able to practice, so that way you can go ahead and build your confidence. Now, the pros of this, there's no upfront work because we're literally giving you word for word the entire script. It allows you to be able to get into momentum. It allows you to be able to get those practice calls rolling as soon as possible. But the cons of this is that it lacked customization, right? You weren't actually able to be able to customize this. And so therefore you were relying on RWA to tell you word for word exactly what it is that you were going to tell your students. And that in and of itself was also not the best approach that we could have taken. And so visually, when you actually looked at the options that we had, this is what it looked like visually, right? We had option number one on the left side, and option number one was where we had the do-it-yourself approach. And then on the right side, we had option number two, which was the done-for-you approach. And so this is what's going to happen. And this is kind of like the synopsis and the summary of everything, okay? Is that for most of Module 5, we have decided to go with option 2, okay? So for most of Module 5, as you go through this entire module and as you go through this training, you're going to have a word-for-word script for your practice coaching calls, okay? So this is going to allow you to be able to have a lot of the pros that we just talked about. Now, you might have the question and you might say, okay, I understand that, Coach Yasin, for Module 5, we're going to have a done-for-you approach, but what about I want to have some customization? Well, let me go ahead and walk you through why we decided to be able to have a done-for-you approach inside of a lot of Module 5, and then how all of this is going to really come together, okay? So a couple reasons why we decided for most of this module module to do a done for you approach. Okay, so reason number one is that it's easier to steer a moving car. What we found is that if we went ahead and told you as a student to say, okay, before you can actually do any practice calls, you are going to have to go out and create your own trainings, then what would happen is that it would literally be impossible for you to get started and get into momentum. And so when we do a done for you approach, where we provide for you a templated script, when we provide for you something to get started, right, even if that is only in the practice call setting, what ends up happening is that it allows you to get the ball rolling, because a parked car is impossible to steer. That's the first reason. Reason number two is that it allows you to be able to tweak by doing. Because here's the thing, as you go through the practice calls that you're going to go through in Module 5, and here in a second, I'm going to walk you through all of this. I know all of this seems very vague and hypothetical and theoretical right now, but you're going to see that, hey, you're going to have 12 practice calls that you are going to be conducting throughout Module 5. And what's going to happen is that it's going to allow you to be able to build your own program that is going to be built as you do these practice calls. How? Because as you are delivering the 12 practice calls inside of this module, you are going to learn and take notes on, hey, what did you like? What didn't you like? What suited your voice and what didn't suit your voice, right? How would you tweak it for yourself? What would you prefer in the wording of things? And so here's the thing. If you get through the end of Module 5 and you get through all of these practice calls and you don't have a bunch of changes that you would like to tweak in the actual coaching calls in order to suit you better, then you've probably done it wrong. Because I'm telling you right now, as you start going through coaching call 1, coaching call 2, coaching call 3, and onwards all the way to coaching call 12, you're going to have a massive stack of notes that you have taken and said, okay, this is what worked for me, this is what didn't work for me. And that is what we're talking about when we talk about being able to steer a car that is already moving. Rather than you sitting in a room with a blank document and trying to come up with your own script for your own coaching calls, this is how you are going to learn, by actually doing. Rather than you having to come up with all of this, we are having a done for you approach. So that way, with the done for you approach, you can eventually get to the customization. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about here in just a second. And then the third reason that we decided to go with the done for you approach here inside of Module 5 is because of RWA Squid Game. Now, you might be here seeing like, hey, Squid Game, that show from Netflix? Yeah. So if we had gone with option 1 and we had said, okay, hey, here's a framework, let you go out and make your own scripts, I'm telling you right now, it would have been an RWA student massacre. Because the truth is that making your own scripts for your own coaching calls for a beginner is extremely, extremely difficult. And so if we had gone down that route, we would have so few students who would have survived because they would have procrastinated and never actually got into making their own scripts, and then they would have been unable to actually do the practice calls, and they would have been unable to actually move forward with the curriculum. And so it would have been like RWA Squid Game. If you don't know what Squid Game is, it's a viral TV show on Netflix where basically 455 people played a life or death game in order to win a $5 million prize. And so if we had gone with option 1 and not provided you more structure, then we would have had students dropping off left and right because it would have been too difficult for a beginner to do on day number 1. Okay, so this is why for most of this module, you are going to have a more done for you copy and paste word for word script for your coaching calls. Okay, that is why all of that exists the way that it does. However, we were not 100% happy with this. Why? Because the truth is that in the one-on-one model, if you have a cookie cutter training program for every single student, right? For every single one of your students, if you have a cookie cutter program, it's not going to feel as valuable. And so here in Module 5, when I show you what your outline of your practice calls is going to be, you don't want to get married to this because you have to understand that you are going to be customizing this. Now, in a hybrid model, it's different, right? In a hybrid model, when you have a classroom, obviously there's a limited amount of customization. But in a one-on-one model, there has to be at least some customization because the student is like, yo, I'm talking to you on a weekly basis. How come we are walking through this step-by-step kind of cookie cutter model, right? And so the reason why a done for you approach for your transformation program would not work in reality is because we do not want you to be a remote control student who follows blindly and expects to be spoon-fed, right? We want you to be able to tap into your own creativity and resourcefulness so that way you are not tied to the Remote Wellness Academy for the rest of your life. We want you to be successful so that way you can go on and go ahead and have an amazing career and make an amazing income and have an amazing life as a result of that, right? And so what's the solution? The solution is what we call option number 3. What's option number 3? Option number 3 is a combination of the do-it-yourself and the done-for-you approach. Option number 3 is what we call the done-for-you, do-it-yourself approach, okay? And then in this option number 3, we have the pros, which is no upfront work, momentum, and you get the customization, and you get none of the cons. So what we're going to be doing here in Module 5 is that you are going to be practicing via the practice calls with the scripts and the structure that we provide. And then what's going to happen is at the end of this module, we are going to walk you through how to be able to customize this for your own program, okay? And the awesome thing about this is that it's the best of both worlds. As I said, at the end of Module 5, once you've made it through all of the practice, in typical RWA fashion, we are going to over-deliver for you, right? We're going to over-deliver, and we're going to teach you how to mix and match to be able to create your own scripts, so that way by the end of Module 5, you will have both the practice that came as a result of the structure from the done-for-you approach, and you are going to have the freedom to be able to create your own training scripts, okay? So I just want to make sure you're not going to be upset if we decided that we were going to over-deliver and instead of just having one or the other, because we've tried both, right? We've tried, hey, give you complete freedom, but then students procrastinate, they don't have enough structure, they're not able to go with momentum, and they're stuck. And we've tried the done-for-you approach where we said, hey, this is exactly how it has to be, do not make any changes, but then all of a sudden we've taken away your ability to be creative, we've taken away your ability to actually have resourcefulness, and basically you're tied to us for the rest of your life, right? And so both approaches are really have their pros and cons, but this is with this option number 3, that is how we're going to be able to have the best of all the worlds, okay? And that is how we're going to be over delivering. And so this is why I want to go ahead and mention here the RWA over delivery promise, because I bet you the amount of value that you thought that you were going to get compared to when you actually joined RWA versus the amount of value that you actually got, right? This is what we call the RWA over delivery promise, because we promise the value that you get from the Remote Wellness Academy will always far exceed your investment, and a positive return on investment is what we are talking about here. And that is why I wanted to go ahead and talk about this right here in the beginning before we actually talk about anything else. And as Robin told Batman, holy over delivery, Batman. RWA is amazing. So yes, like I said, that is the approach that we are doing. That's why I wanted to go ahead and pre-frame and preface all of this before I actually get into the training curriculum overview, so that way you understand exactly the purpose of Module 5, right? And so really to go ahead and bring this home, let's go ahead and talk about the objective of Module 5. So what that means is that in Module 5, the structure, the scripts, the topics that we're going to be providing for you are all there for practice. Practice for what? It's practice so that way you can get used to speaking with someone out loud. It's practice for you to get used to talking to others about health. Module 5 is the training wheels. It's the momentum. It's not the end all be all that it's going to be that way for your students forever. Because the truth is this, like we already talked about, most of the people in general inside of this program have never done anything like this before. They don't know, you guys don't know how to deliver an education and transformation using your voice, right? You guys don't know how to be able to do all of that without sounding like a robot. And so once you get through the end of Module 5, you will have spoken all of these topics out loud and taught them in a one-on-one format. And then once you get to the end of Module 5, it's just a matter of, hey, okay, cool, I've already talked about all this. Now I get to reorganize it the way that I want. I can go ahead and put my own personality and my own flair to it. And so the objective of Module 5 is to provide you the training wheels for you to get the momentum to find your voice. What does it mean to find your voice? It means that when you speak, you have confidence in what it is that you are saying. And just so you understand what it is that I'm talking about here, is that this is what I want you to really get from Module 5, is that how come if I myself, Yasin or Coach Malik or Coach Cole or any of the RWA coaches, if we were to go ahead and read the scripts that you are going to be provided in Module 5, how come it's going to sound like we are a coach versus when some RWA students read those same scripts, it sounds like they are a robot? Why? Because those students haven't yet found their voice, right? They haven't yet been able to put in the practice. They haven't yet put in the reps to be able to find their voice. And so even though they are the exact same words that you are going to have inside of Module 5, even though you're going to have the exact same scripts, when we read them out loud, it sounds like we're coaches versus when a beginner reads them out loud, it sounds like they're a robot. And so this transformation is the objective of Module 5. It's the reps. It's the reps of you speaking out loud these concepts over and over and over again, so that way you can find your voice. Not necessarily the exact script, but the practice. That is the objective, okay? So I don't want you to misconstrue this, because a lot of students who go through the overview that we're about to go through right now and think, oh, this is the end all be all. This is exactly the way that I'm going to be delivering this to my student. Remember, this is the practice curriculum. And then once you get through the practice curriculum, you will be able to go ahead and edit things and make it from there. I hope that is absolutely clear, and I hope that absolutely 100% makes sense. Let us know if you have any questions about that. But on that note, what I want to go ahead and do now is I do want to go ahead and talk to you about the actual 12 practice modules, the practice coaching calls that you are going to be conducting here inside of this module. Because what I'm about to show you right now is what we call the spine of your 12 practice coaching calls. So remember, your 12 calls that are going to be inside of your transformation program may or may not look exactly like this. However, these are going to be the 12 practice coaching calls that we do inside of this module. And then as you deliver them, you're going to be able to learn what it is that you need to tweak. And so the structure is not the end all be all. The point of all this is just to be able to speak it out loud. Okay, so this is what we call the spine of your practice curriculum inside of module number 5. Drum roll, please. And so this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so inside of this module, you are going to have 12 coaching calls that you are going to deliver. Coaching call number 1 is going to be titled Goal Setting and Clearing the Clutter. Coaching call number 2 is going to be called What to Eat and Water. Coaching call number 3 is going to be called Sleep, the Dark Force Holding You Back. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Beliefs and Stories Around Food. 10, The New Norm. 11, Life Inventory. And 12, Completion Ritual. Okay, now I am not going to go over all of the details of each of those coaching calls inside of this training. We are going to be going over the details and the word-for-word scripting and all of that inside of each coaching call's own training inside of this module. But for right now, this was just a quick overview of that. But here is a question for you. Do these topics look familiar? Do these topics that you are going to be delivering as your practice coaching calls inside of this module, do they look familiar? I know, exactly, right? Now you see why we had you go through module 2 and module 3 and all of the preparation work inside of this certification is because now you already know and have experience with many of these topics just in a different format. Pretty cool, right? It's almost like we knew what we were doing here at the Remote Wellness Academy, right? It's almost like we've done this a couple hundreds or a couple thousand times before that we actually knew what it is that we were talking about. We did all of that preparation in the previous modules, so that way once you got to this module here and you actually had to deliver and practice delivering that knowledge and that transformation, you already had the background, so it wasn't like you were having to learn it from scratch. And so that is the really cool thing about how all of this comes together. And I'm really pumped as you dive into the rest of this module to really start to see how all these practice calls really interlace with a lot of the things you already know. So we've gone ahead and set you up with a very strong foundation so that way you understand exactly how all of this comes together. Beautiful. Now that we've gone ahead and talked about the overview of the 12 practice training modules that you are going to be practicing throughout this upcoming module, what I want to go ahead and do right now is I want to go ahead and shed some light on why these training modules work. Because as you can see, and as you're going to see more of when you actually go through the practice calls, is that the practice training curriculum that you're going to be walking through, it's not complex and it's not dense, right? It's very, very straightforward, right? Especially when you look at this and you look at, okay, I see these 12 practice coaching calls that I'm going to be delivering inside of this module. Well, it doesn't look that complicated, right? So how is it so effective? How is this so different than a list of to-dos, or how is this so different than a list of activities? And that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do inside of the first half of this training, is because what I want you to walk away from this training is that I want you to understand is that creating a training curriculum that actually gets results is not about throwing a bunch of coaching calls and a bunch of information together and calling it a program, right? Training modules that get results are in fact designed in a very deliberate and a very conscious way. There are so many people out there who just go out there and create online courses or coaching programs, right? And then they wonder why their students don't get results. And so RWA is here to save you years of agony, and we really are here to show you the ninja magic behind why structuring an effective transformation program works and how it actually works, so that way you can do it in a way that has people and your students saying, wow, you changed my life. That doesn't happen randomly. It doesn't happen haphazardly. It doesn't happen, you just stumble on it, and then all of a sudden people say, oh, you changed my life. It's not random, and it's not by accident. It is by design. And so what we're going to go ahead and do here in a second, and for the rest of this training, is I'm going to walk you through exactly how this training modules are structured and how your practice modules are structured. Now, the point of me walking you through this is not so that way you copy these exact same 12 modules, right? It's not so that way you copy these exact same structure right here. The point of me walking you through why this entire program works is so that way you can understand the principles behind this, okay? And the reason why it's important to understand the principles behind creating a transformation program that works is because guess what? You are going to be creating your own transformation program as well. And so as a result of that, we want you to be able to have the confidence. We want you to know that, hey, this transformation program that I went through for the sake of the practice calls was something that was not just thrown together, but that way you can actually see the psychology behind it. So that way when you model this for your own transformation program and you actually have the conviction that what you are offering to your practice and your paying students is actually valuable. Number two is because that way you'll have the heads up, right? That way you understand, hey, I understand when I am going through these practice modules throughout the rest of this module, I'm understanding why this happens. And then the third reason is so that way you have the power. Remember, our goal at RWA is for you not to be chained to us for the rest of your life. So what we got to do is we got to help you understand how a transformation program is structured, so that way you can go out there and create your own transformation programs as well, okay? And so that is what I want to go ahead and walk you through right now, is I want to walk you through how and why these training modules, right, the practice training modules that you're going to be walking through inside of this module, and why they are so effective and how they are structured, okay? So we're going to be talking about 4 reasons, and those 4 reasons are going to be, number 1, the reason why these practice calls are so effective is because of something called the ARC. Number 2 is the anticipating enemy, number 1. Number 3 is embedded invitations, and number 4 is the coaching call structure. Remember, I'm going to say this a gazillion times over and over and over again. It's not these specific 12 coaching calls or these specific topics or these specific scripts, but it's more so the psychology and the principles behind them, which is what you're going to learn right now. Because once you learn these 4 reasons, then it allows you to understand the principles for you to be able to create your own transformation program as well. So let's go ahead and talk about reason number 1 right now, which is the arc. Now, what is an arc? The arc of something refers to its overall path, right? When you actually zoom out from a 30,000 foot overview, the arc, like if you think about like a movie arc is like when you zoom out of a movie, right? You have the script of the movie, you have like before it gets filmed and everything like that. The arc is the storyline. It's the narrative. It's this overall narrative that is connecting all of the pieces together from the entire movie, okay? And so what's happening is that there is a specific arc within this transformation program, this first transformation program that you're going to be delivering. And I want you to understand this arc so you can go ahead and understand that, okay, when I design a program, there is a natural progression, there is a storyline, there is a natural narrative that is the backbone, that is the spine of this entire transformation program. The way that these training modules are structured is not just random. And so the training modules in the specific 90-day transformation program that you are going to be taking your students through has 6 6 stages, okay? There's foundations, there's health foundations, there's identity foundations, there's managing stress, nutrition, and movement, there's identity specific, and then there's new baseline. And so what I want to show you is I want to show you a visual representation of this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take the spine that we had earlier, the same exact spine that we had earlier, and all we're doing is we're now adding on the arc, okay? We're just adding on the arc so that way you can go ahead and see what it looks like. And so you'll see on here that the first training, which is goal setting and clearing the clutter, the first coaching call is all about foundations. And then the next two are all about health foundations. And then the next two after that are identity foundations. Then the next three after that are managing stress, nutrition, and movement. The next two are all about identity specific. And then the last two are all about the new baseline. Okay, so let me go ahead and walk you through this so that way you understand what's going on here. Okay, so we said foundations. The foundations, this is the first coaching call where you are setting the student up for the rest of the program. Then after that, we move into health foundations, which is coaching calls numbers 2 and 3. This is where they are getting their foundational health in place and you're giving them more of what they came for, right? This is typically what the student expects when they actually join a health program, right? Then after that, the third part of this entire arc is the identity foundations. This is where after they've gotten a taste of what it is that they came for, right? They came for the health foundations, they got a taste of that, but then all of a sudden you flip the script on them and then you give them what they actually need, which is the becoming process. And so this is where you actually introduce them to what has kept them truly stuck all of this time. That's the identity foundations. Then from there, you move on to managing stress, nutrition, and movement. So after they go through the identity coaching, they turn back to the nutrition, but at a deeper level. And so now you're introducing them to topics that they have probably never been actually familiar with, okay? And then level 5 is identity specific. We return back to identity near the end of the curriculum, but now we are specific to food and their new norm, right? After being in the program for 9 and 10 weeks. And then finally, the end of the arc is the new baseline. At the end of the program, in coaching calls 11 and 12, we're now addressing the new baseline, because think about it. They've been in the program for, at this point, 12 weeks. Now we're addressing, hey, this is the new baseline, and this is what your new life looks like. What do you want to do with this new perspective? And so you can see this is not just a bunch of random topics that were put together. This is the arc of the training modules for your first 90-day transformation program. I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up here so you can see the visual of this. This is what it looks like from the visual perspective. And then obviously we have the explanation for you there, all right? Now, in regards to the arc, I want to go ahead and emphasize this, is that the focus and the goal of the trainings, right? The overarching, there you go, arch, right? Overarching 30,000 foot focus is that it's not only about health. The goal and the focus of the arc is to help coach the student to becoming the person they need to become in order to make their dreams a reality effortlessly. A lot of times in the coaching calls, we leave a lot of the diet and lifestyle changes to the action steps of each call. And we spend more of each coaching call talking about making the shift to becoming someone who takes those actions effortlessly. And so the goal of the coaching calls really is the experience and the becoming, not so much the tactics. Why? Because as you already know, as we've already hit a gazillion times throughout this program, is that the tactics will take care of themselves once someone has become the person. And so in this way, even if a student doesn't get to their goal on paper, by the end of the program, the experience and the becoming is going to change their life so much that that is going to be the transformation that is going to serve them more than the quote unquote on paper goal. And that's because of what we talked about with the infinite game, and they're going to just end up where they were again at some point in their life. But the biggest transformation that you can help them with is actually learning the skills and becoming the person who can address those issues when they come up again later on in their life. Now, again, remember, we're just going over the overview of the 12 modules. The actual scripting and the word for word, we're going to get into that, but I just want you to understand the concept and the overview here so that way you understand the psychology that makes up the 12 training modules and exactly the arc behind them as well. Now, a quick note about the arc that we just talked about. Remember, even though we are showing you the arc of the practice modules that you are going to be going through inside of module 5, remember the point of this isn't to get married to this specific arc, but to understand that a successful training program has an arc in it period. That is the point for you to learn this principle. So that way, when you actually go out and create your own transformation programs in the future, you can go ahead and make sure that they do have an arc inside of them. And so even though right now, the way that we're talking about the arc is the magnificent arc that is inside of the practice training calls, the practice coaching calls that you're going to be doing inside of module 5. Remember, it's not that this arc for some reason is magical or special. It's that there is an arc in it, period. And that is exactly the reason why we are talking about the importance of the principle. All right. Beautiful. And so that is reason number 1 of why these training modules and why training modules in general that are so successful work, is because of the arc. We're now going to go ahead and move on to reason number 2, which is going to be all about anticipating enemy number 1. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So reason number 2, anticipating enemy number 1. Enemy number 1 is the biggest reason why students do not succeed in a program. What is enemy number 1? The enemy number 1 is self-sabotage. Now, what is self-sabotage? Self-sabotage is when a student reverts back to the old behavior that once helped them cope with their life, but it is not helping them grow into who they now desire to become, right? It's no longer serving them. And so the self-sabotaging behavior that helped serve them in the past is not serving them anymore. And the reason why this happens is because, like we already talked about in many other trainings in the past, is that it's the student's version 1.0 self. It's the student's limbic brain that is trying to fight to survive, all right? And so we've talked about this many times. These visual images at this point are very familiar to you, right? Now, as an example to this, I want to go ahead and talk about, for example, binge eating. Let's say, for example, you have a student who used to binge eat when life was hard, right? It was the best strategy that they had at the time in order to be able to cope with life being difficult. Now, my question is, what are the chances that this student is going to start binge eating again during your program? Pretty high, right? And so this is what it's going to look like. The student's going to say, oh, I fell off of track. And then the RWP is going to say, oh man, I'm a terrible coach. I could have stopped them. I didn't stop them. This is terrible, right? But here's the truth. The truth is that now that you're starting to learn that students are going to self-sabotage regardless, guess what? It's expected. And so when you actually expect that the student is going to do that the student is going to revert back to old patterns that don't serve them, when it's a part of the plan and when it's baked into the actual training, well, guess what? They're not quote unquote off track. They haven't fallen off track because we expected them to do this. Do you see the mindset shift there? This is very important to understand, is that when you expect that this is a normal part of the process, there is no falling off track because you baked in the fact that they were going to quote unquote fall off track into the track. And so when you've baked it into the track, it's not quote unquote falling off track because it's a part of the actual plan. Now, in regards to how to tell if a student is actually self-sabotaging, if their actual version 1.0 self is self-sabotaging them, some of the common signs that you are going to notice when that actually happens is that you are going to notice that, number 1, a student is not going to follow through. That's a telltale sign. Number 2 is that they come up with seemingly rational excuses to miss coaching calls or not go through the trainings or any of that. You might be laughing right now because some of this might be relevant to you as you went through the trainings in the RWA Academy, right? In the Remote Wellness Academy. Number 3, students come up with reasons to put others instead of themselves. Number 4, students say, you know what? This isn't really the right time for me after all. I thought this was going to be the right time, but I got all this stuff going on. And so it's just not the right time for me after all. Typical sign, because at the end of the day, when is it ever going to be the right time? Never. And so it's just the normal version 1.0 self, the limbic brain that is fighting to survive. Students will say, hey, this program isn't the best program for me after all. I realized, I need something that's more flexible. I need something that's more rigid. I need something that's more whatever, fill in the blank, right? They're going to come up with any number of reasons why this program is not the right program for them after all, right? Number 6, student disappears altogether. They completely ghost you. And all of a sudden you're left wondering what happened to them. And so many other ways. These are just 6 ways. There are so many other creative ways of cat ate my homework, dog ate my homework, whatever, that students actually self-sabotage. Remember, the job of the version 1.0 self is not there for you to help you thrive. The limbic brain and the version 1.0 self has one goal and one goal only. And that goal is to survive. And so even though self-sabotage and all the things that we just talked about is terrible for thriving, guess what it's amazing for? It's amazing for surviving. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that the limbic brain and the version 1.0 self cares about. Now, the reason why it's so important that you need to understand this is because as an RWP, you need to understand that you have to expect that this is going to happen. Your transformation program success has very little to do with the information that you teach, and it has everything to do with anticipating where your student is going to fall off track, okay? Because if you anticipate where students fall off track, then what you can do is you can design your program in a way that helps students stay on track, helps them stay within the transformation process, and then your students will get amazing results and have the potential to stay with you for many years because they just keep on renewing, okay? So a lot of education providers and coaches don't even know that this exists, okay? This entire process of self-sabotage, they don't even understand that it exists, okay? And that's why we're here to go ahead and equip you with this ahead of time. Because every single time an RWP does not understand that this is going to happen, something very tragic happens. And what is that? What happens is that when a student disappears or drops off, which is normal, it happens, it tends to happen, RWPs and coaches really struggle and think, oh my God, I'm a terrible coach. It's all my fault, right? But the truth is, like we talked about, I'm just going to go ahead and go into a little bit more detailed, is that the truth is that the student's limbic brain is just going crazy. Remember what we talked about before? Any human being, when they start anything new, they are going to initially get overwhelmed. And that is what the limbic brain says, you know what? I got to step in to protect us. And so because the limbic brain sees overwhelm as change, and change equals potential threat to existence, the limbic brain would rather have us stay where we are because it prioritizes survival. So what's the solution? The solution is to design our program around this fact. We know it's going to happen. It's a fact. And so we need to make sure that we design our program around this inevitability, okay? And so this is what I'm going to show you here in a moment, so that way you can see how we are designing the 12 calls that you're going to be delivering. We're going to be designing this around this fact that the students are going to have thoughts around quitting, and that we are going to design this around the fact that students' limbic brains are going to take over. And so it is our responsibility as RWPs to design our transformation programs around this fact. And so master remote wellness practitioners design programs that account for the inevitability that students are going to fall off track, because master RWPs know that a part of the student, when they start to make a change, is always going to be clinging and attached to their old way of being. Now, does that mean just because we understand this, just because we know this, and because we are expecting this, that we are not going to have students drop out of our program? No, it's going to happen occasionally from time to time, and that's fine. But the point of all of this is that more often than not, when we expect this and when we design our programs around this fact, we are going to be able to help save more students from self-sabotaging because we actually understand this. And so now that we understand this concept of self-sabotage and we understand that students actually do this and it's an inevitable fact, let's go ahead and now talk about and overlay this entire understanding on top of the 12 coaching calls, right? Because inside of your first 90-day transformation program, there are going to be 3 main points inside of your training modules that students are going to self-sabotage, okay? It's going to happen, number 1, at the very start. It's going to happen, number 2, in the middle, and number 3, right before the end. And so if we go ahead and visually put this on top of our skeleton, okay, we have our arc. We've already talked about the arc. And now we have this new column on here called self-sabotage. And so it's going to happen here on coaching call number 1, self-sabotage, and we'll talk about why that is here in a second. It's going to happen right around the middle or right before the middle, training coaching calls 4 and 5. And then right before the end in coaching calls 9 and 10, there's also going to be another point of self-sabotage there. Now, in order to make sure that we understand how and why this actually takes place, let's go ahead and talk about this in more detail, okay? So at the very start, we said that is the first point that is going to happen and where the student is actually going to self-sabotage. Well, the question is, why does that happen? The reason why this happens at the very beginning is the fact that the limbic brain is starting to sense, oh snap, I've actually now joined a program. I might actually have to change, and this could be the catalyst that gets me to change. Well, guess what? I'm going to go ahead and self-sabotage so that way I don't have to commit to this change. Okay, now how do they actually do this? Many times, not always, students will start to say things in the very beginning of the program that's like, okay, now that I've joined this program, I don't know if this is what I was expecting. Now that I actually got into the program, I was expecting something different, right? Now, this is given that you don't have a terrible product, right? Because if you have a terrible product and you get somebody into the program and it's literally nothing, like it's completely different than what it is that you were promising on the strategy session, obviously that's going to be a normal normal reaction that students are going to have. But if you know for a fact that you have a good product in the way that we are helping you design your product, right? If you know for a fact that everything is good on that end, and you just have a small handful of students that come in, not every student. If every student is saying, hey, this is not what I expected, you have a problem with your product. But if you have a handful of students that self-sabotage and they come in and say, you know what, this is not what I expected. In that case, that is a telltale sign that the student is self-sabotaging in the beginning of your program. Number two, sometimes, not always, sometimes they might say, you know what, now that I've joined the program, I've seen what's here, I don't think this is for me. Or number three, hey, now that I've joined the program, I've seen what's here, I should be able to go ahead and do all of this by myself. Now that I see this, you know what? This all looks like something I can do by myself. I don't really need this program. I'm just going to go ahead and try doing it all by myself. Well, obviously, none of these are true because the reason why they haven't done it themselves all this time is because of the fact that they haven't been able to do it by themselves. And so obviously they need the program. However, this is just a telltale sign that they are self-sabotaging. Now, you'll notice that when we actually get into the structure of coaching call number 1 later on inside of this module, you're going to notice that we actually account for the fact that some students are going to self-sabotage in the beginning of the program. We're going to structure the entire call around this fact. Beautiful. So that is the first point that students are going to self-sabotage, which is in the very beginning. Let's go ahead and talk about the second point that students are going to self-sabotage, which is around coaching call number 4 and 5. Okay, so this happens in coaching call 4 and 5, right in the middle of the program, right before the middle of the program, right? Remember, 12 calls, 6 is the middle point, right before coaching call number 6. This is where we go ahead and introduce them to version 1.0 self, and we pre-frame that self-sabotaging is coming, okay? Why does this happen at this point? It happens at this point because the student has been in the program for about 4 or 5 weeks, okay? They've started to notice some changes in their life, and now all of the limbic brain is saying, you know what? This is not as exciting anymore, right? They don't get that dopamine hit that they got when they first joined the program, right? And so all of a sudden they think, you know what? Things are going well, everything's going awesome, and I just don't have that excitement anymore. And so they start to make things up that are problems when there's no actual problem. It's really just happening is that they're hitting that upper limit problem. Do you remember that upper limit problem we talked about? When things go very well for you, you end up saying, things are going too well. It's time for me to go ahead and self-sabotage so I can bring myself back into a normal norm, right? That's that Stockholm syndrome that we talked about. And so you're going to notice in the scripting for coaching calls 4 and 5, and the reason why we have those specific topics around identity here is because we're going ahead and switching to talking about becoming and talking about self-sabotage so they can actually start to become cognizant and aware and conscious of the fact that they do this. As humans, we do this. And so they're going to start to become more aware of, wait a second, I have a version 1.0 self. I have to be able to train my version 2.0 self. All of that is what you are introducing to them in coaching calls 4 and 5 for that exact reason. And so this is how we actually go ahead and design the training program around this fact, knowing that they are going to self-sabotage right before the middle because the dopamine is starting to now go down. They've made some initial changes to what they eat, the drinking water, the sleep. They've made some initial changes. Things are starting to go well, but then all of a sudden they want to self-sabotage and then boom, right there, that's when we meet them with the trainings that are going to address the self-sabotage exactly right there. And then finally, there is the third point that students are going to start to self-sabotage, and that is going to be right before the end of the actual program. Okay, so right inside of coaching calls number 9 and 10, right before the end of the transformation program, they are going to start to self-sabotage. Why does that happen? Because the student can start to see that their transformational experience is starting to come to an end and they just don't want it to end yet. And so what the student does, because they don't want to lose out on the experience, they don't want to lose you as an RWP, what they start to do is they start to kind of postpone the calls. They start to say, hey, I'm busy. They start to make up problems in their life because they're like, hey, I do actually need you longer in my life. I need you to help me more because this has been so helpful for me. So I'm going to start to self-sabotage and make problems for myself so that way I can extend and prolong this experience, okay? And the reason they do this is because they don't want to feel abandoned, right? Because it's not typical that we have somebody in our life that is like an RWP that provides us so much support. And because they fear that, because they fear losing that, all of a sudden they want to go ahead and self-sabotage. And so it's for this exact reason that we structure coaching calls 9, 10, 11, that entire kind of ending of the transformation program. You're going to notice in the scripting when we get there that we structure those coaching calls at the very end of the program around this. So that way we not only expect it, but we can also protect the student from this self-sabotage. Now, again, I do want to just go ahead and emphasize, don't worry about how to do this, right? This is just the 30,000 foot overview in terms of understanding why it actually exists. So that way, when you see it in the scripting, you understand exactly why it is there, all right? So this is just a 30,000 foot overview. And then once we actually get into the training for every single coaching call, you'll understand and see it there that, oh, okay, this is the reason why this is here, because we're actually protecting the student from self-sabotage. Now remember, just like we talked about for the first reason, is that even though right now we are showing you how we anticipate self-sabotage inside of the practice modules that you are going to be going through inside of module 5, the point of us showing you this reason isn't for you to get married to this specific structure and avoiding self-sabotage exactly like this. But instead, the point of you learning this is to understand that a successful transformation program, a successful training module program anticipates self-sabotage. And so the point is for you to learn the principle so that way when you go out there and create your own training programs in the future, you can also make sure that you are structuring them around anticipating self-sabotage inside of the programs that you create. And so again, this isn't some magical structure that like all of a sudden these specific practice coaching calls that you're going to be doing inside of module 5, that you got to anticipate self-sabotage specifically within them exactly this way, but instead to understand the principle behind them. That is the most important thing. And so when you start putting everything together and you start to say, okay, hey, you know what? We are anticipating that students are going to start to think about self-sabotaging usually in the beginning of the program, somewhere in the middle of the program, and somewhere right before the end of the program. That is the principle. Again, do not get married to these specific topics. Do not get married specifically to this exact structure, that it has to be exactly this way. It's to understand the principle, and then these are just the practice coaching calls that you are going to have throughout this specific module. And then when you go out and start to create your own training programs and your own training modules, and you really go ahead and structure this according to what it is that you want to structure it for your specific student, you will be able to go ahead and apply this entire specific principle to your training modules then. Beautiful. Now, that is the second reason why this specific training structure and this training modules are as transformational as they are, which was anticipating enemy number 1. Okay. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're now going to go ahead and talk about the third reason. And the third reason is all about embedded invitations for renewal. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So embedded invitations for renewal. This is the third reason why these training modules structured in this way work so well. But the question you might have is, what are embedded invitations for renewal? Well, this is where we actually infuse natural invitations to continue working with us within the actual structure of our training, okay? So there are going to be 4 points in which we are going to embed invitations to continue to work with us, okay? So we're going to have on coaching call 8, 10, 11, and 12, we are going to have within those specific coaching calls embedded invitations to continue to work with us. Okay, so if I go ahead and overlay this as a visual on top of where we are so far, this is what it looks like. Okay, so we have our spine of the 12 coaching calls. We've talked about the arc. We've talked about self-sabotage, and you're going to notice invitation. And so at coaching call 8, 10, 11, and 12, we are going to have inside of the scripting of those coaching calls embedded invitations to continue to work with us. And so specifically in coaching call number 8, what we're doing is we're planting the seed. In coaching call number 10, what we are doing is we're going ahead and counteracting the self-sabotage that happens. So you see these two kind of work together. Same thing, coaching call number 11, we're counteracting the self-sabotage as, hey, I don't want this experience to end. Well, guess what? Don't worry. You don't have to self-sabotage because you're scared this experience is going to end. Let's go ahead and have an invitation of how you can understand how to continue working with us. And then of course, coaching call number 12 is going to be a modified strategy session, which automatically has an invitation to continue working with us as well. Now, again, don't worry if this 100% does not make sense to you. I'm just going ahead and explaining the 30,000 foot overview. And then once we get into the word for word scripting, you'll have a better understanding of the actual details of how all of this works. Now, a couple quick points to notice about the embedded invitations to renew and continue. Okay, so a couple quick points on this. Point number one is that we're not just asking once for the student to continue with us, we're asking 4 times. Okay, the embedded invitations are happening 4 times within the entire training modules. This is very important to notice. Too many newbie RWPs who don't understand or learn this structure, they say, oh, I asked the person to renew with me and they didn't renew with me. Okay, well, how many times did you ask them, right? And then on top of that, not only how many times did you ask them, did you actually include within the trainings and set up the trainings in a way that naturally the student would renew with you, right? So what we're doing is we're integrating, infusing, and merging the renewal process within the actual trainings, within the actual coaching calls, so that way it becomes automatic for the student to want to continue working with us at the end of their first transformation, okay? And so what we're doing is we're gradually and consistently opening up the possibility of the student continuing their journey with us, and it's all embedded inside of the program. How cool is that, right? That is the first point that I want you to notice about this specific reason. Point number 2 is the value of this pro tip. The fact that you are receiving a training curriculum that is already built for you, that includes this strategy within it, I cannot tell you how valuable this actually is. This strategy by itself is almost worth the entire price of admission to becoming a remote wellness practitioner because of how valuable it is. There are so many people out there that run education programs who don't know this strategy, and for years they have lost out on hundreds of thousands of renewal revenue because they did not know and understand this ninja technique that you just learned that is already going to be baked inside of your training module. So that is the second point I want to make about this, okay? And then point number 3 is that embedded invitations for renewal do not mean requirement. This is very important to understand. Remember, it's just an invitation. By having this in our program, this does not mean that we are saying the student will not have an amazing experience if they do not continue. No. They are going to have an amazing experience in your program regardless, even if they choose not to continue or even if they choose to continue. Either way, we are looking to deliver an amazing experience of value, period. And if they continue, it's just a bonus. And so the big thing to understand is that if they choose not to continue, it does not mean that their first 90-day transformation program wasn't enough. This is a very important mindset shift to make, okay? It just means that there's another leg of the journey that if the student continues, they will be able to continue that journey. But the first 90-day transformation program by itself is complete if they chose not to continue as well. And then finally, the last point that I want to go ahead and draw your attention to in regards to this is that you're not a one-trick pony. If you look at the spine of this 90-day transformation program, and as you're going to notice throughout this module, as you go through the practice calls and the trainings for each of the coaching calls, what you're going to notice is that there is a lot that you learned in module 2 and 3 that is not a part of your first 90-day transformation program. Why is that the case? Because as you learned earlier in this program, you are not a one-trick pony. In this first 90-day transformation program, we have barely touched the surface of the depth of what you have learned in module 2 and 3. Modules 2 and 3 are the toolbox that you have assembled that you are able to pull from. And so when a student renews with you, you have a depth of knowledge for the student to continue to work with you on many more 90-day transformations after the first one. And then also, if one part of your transformation product doesn't fit the needs of a particular student, well, guess what? Once you master this training creation process, it'll be easy for you to just take that one piece out and then plug in another one from your toolbox. Very easy. Are you starting to see how this opportunity that we're talking about, when we talk about it as a career opportunity, as an impact opportunity, as a giving back opportunity, are you seeing how this opportunity is completely different from every other industry that's out there? How your product is so different from every other industry that's out there? And guess what? You have enough in your toolbox just in the health department to have a student be with you for many renewals of their 90-day transformation program. And guess what? That's all within only the toolbox of health. That's all within only the domain of health. And remember, remote wellness is more than just health, right? We said, what is wellness? Wellness is helping people have transformation and live well in each of the 4 areas of life, right? And so remote wellness is about having physical wellness, financial wellness, relationship wellness, connection to something greater wellness, right? Having a purpose in your life, living for something that's more than you, right? And so down the road, once your student has made it through their first transformation transformation program, you will also be able to expand and branch out and even help the same student with other parts of wellness in their life as well. How cool is that? That is the power of this entire understanding, this entire product that is being built out, that you understand, wait a second, I'm just starting out with my toolbox of health. In module 2 and 3, I learned this, but there's so much more that I can take this student through. And so imagine if you can take a student through many 90-day transformation programs just in the domain of health. Imagine if you went ahead and helped them with their financial wellness, with their relationship wellness, with their connection to something greater wellness. How long is that student going to be with you? You can literally have a student be with you and you help them through so many avenues and so many issues in their life, and they can be with you for years and years and years to come, simply because of the depth of what it is that you're learning and the depth of the transformation that is going to be able to be delivered to your students. Because at this point, as you might have come to realize, is that transformation and being able to transform your life is not a process that happens in a few days. It's not a process that happens in a few weeks. It's not a process that happens in a few months. It's a process that takes years in order to be able to do. And especially if you're talking about other areas of life, it's something that it takes years in order for somebody to have a massive transformation in every aspect of their life. And that's exactly what you can facilitate for your students over the long term once you get down the road. Very cool stuff. As we talk about this, I'm sure there's light bulbs going off in your head as you start to realize, wow, the potential of this career and the potential of what it is that you are starting is massive. And at this point, I don't know, I should have probably had the mind blown meme over here, just so that way it can go ahead and have a visual representation of what you might be realizing right now. So it's some really cool stuff. But again, remember, we're starting off with health for a reason, and we have to stick to what it is that we know. But I'm just planting those seeds so you can really start to understand the scope of where all of this can potentially be headed for you. Now, again, remember, just like I said in all of the other reasons of what we were talking about, even though right now we are showing you how to be able to embed invitations for renewal inside of the practice modules that you are going to go through inside of module 5, the point of all of this, again, I've said this like 2-3 times already. I want to make sure that I say it again and again and again. The point is not to get married to this specific structure. The point is not to get married to having embedded invitations exactly at these specific calls, but to instead understand the principle. What's the principle? The principle that we're talking about here is that you need to understand that in a transformation program, in a successful training module sequence, you are embedding multiple invitations for renewal within the program, and that is how successful training programs succeed. The point is for you to learn the principle so that way you can create your own training programs in the future that also have embedded invitations for renewal. So don't get married to this specific magical thing and say, okay, I have to, for the rest of my life, include embedded invitations in these specific calls. That's just the way that we're going to be practicing them in module 5 and inside of the coaching calls, inside of the practice coaching calls. But the principle behind them still stands regardless of how specifically they look inside of your training programs in the future as well. With that being said, that is us concluding the third reason why this training program or why these training modules are as effective as they are, which is having embedded invitations for renewal. We're now going to go ahead and move over to the fourth reason, and the fourth reason is the coaching call structure. So let's go ahead and talk about that reason number 4 right now. After the overall structure, which we talked about the ARC, self-sabotage points, and the invitation points, the fourth reason why this training curriculum works is because of the structure within each coaching call, right? So this is the secret of structuring an actual coaching call that has students saying, wow, this was one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever gone through. And so what we're going to do here right now, it's a little bit different, right? Because previously in the other 3 reasons, we were kind of talking about the overall and how all of the 12 coaching calls come together, right? We talked about the ARC, the self-sabotage, and the embedded renewals, right? But now what we're going to do is we're actually going to zoom into the micro. We're going to go into each coaching call, and we're going to talk about the structure of each of the calls that makes it so unique, each of the structures that make it so that way it is so effective, right? Because this is the secret to structuring a training that can go ahead and move it from giving information to creating an experience. And this is a massive big takeaway. Why? Because just sitting down and talking to your students about the 6-day energy experiment, yeah, it's cool by itself, but it's not enough for it to be an experience. experience, because knowledge or information in and of itself does not create transformation, right? We've talked about this before, is that if you decide to be the human Google, then guess what? Your student's brain is going to be completely overwhelmed, because remote wellness is 20% information and 80% transformation. Now, of course, there has to be some information, right? You got to be able to explain something that's new, but how do you find that right balance between information and experience? And that's what we are talking about here right now, which is the 6-part structure to a coaching call. This is what we're going to go ahead and introduce you to, so that way you understand exactly how to find that balance between new information and experience. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. The overview of the 6-part training structure. Okay, so each and every single coaching call within it is going to be broken up into 6 parts. Okay, so there are going to be 6 parts. And so the first part is going to be what's going well. Second part is going to be challenges and obstacles. Part number 3 is going to be new information, right? A new topic. Number 4 is going to be an experience exercise. Number 5 is going to be action steps. And then number 6 is going to be ahas, insights, takeaways, and appreciations. Okay, so these are going to be the 6 parts that make up every single one of the coaching calls. So let me go ahead and give you a visual representation of this with it on the actual spine, right? So you can see on here, goal setting and clearing the clutter, 6 parts. What to eat and water, 6 parts. Sleep, 6 parts. Coaching call number 4, 6 parts. 5, 6 parts. 6, conscious eating, 6 parts. Hunger and fullness skill, 6 parts. Every single coaching call is going to be broken up into these 6 parts. And so it's this 6-part training structure. It's 6-part coaching call structure that is transitioning each and every single coaching call from being just new information and making it an actual experience. Does that make sense? This is how we actually transition and get that right balance between information and experience. And I'm going to actually go ahead and explain that to you even more right now. So let's go ahead and do a deep dive into the 6-part training structure, so that way you can actually understand the details behind every single one of these 6 parts. Okay, now just a quick note before I do this, I am going to be giving some estimated times of in that 45-minute block, in that 60-minute block, right? You're delivering the coaching call, you're delivering the training. Inside of that coaching call, what are going to be the estimated times that every single one of these 6 parts is going to take? Now, the note that I want to make is that the estimated times that I'm about to give you are very, very flexible. They're give or take, okay? The times for each section are flexible. They're just guidelines. And so don't take it as a hard and true fast rule. It's just a guideline in general, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about the very first part of these 6 parts. Okay, so the very first part is what's going well. This is typically how we start every single coaching call with. We typically start every single training with this. And typically this is going to take about 1 or 2 minutes. Again, estimated. Remember, not a hard or fast rule, just an estimated time. And so this first part is all about starting with celebration and reminding the student to focus on what's working. Okay, now why do we start each and every single coaching call? Why do we start each and every single training with this? The reason we do this is because the limbic brain tends to focus on what isn't going well. It's all about survival, remember? And so it's very natural for us as human beings to complain and focus on the negative. It's just how we're wired, okay? It's what keeps us alive, right? Or at least that's what kept us alive back in the day from how our brain was actually wired, okay? So in remote wellness, what we are doing is that inside of our coaching and inside of our coaching calls, we are flipping the script and we're starting the call by focusing on what's going well instead, because there's always something that's going well. We just have to practice focusing on it. And so the quote that I really like about this is that what you appreciate appreciates. It's a very nice quote. And so when we focus on what's going well, we get more good things in our life, all right? And so that's the reason why we start every single coaching call off with what's going well. Now, how do we do this? The exact word for word scripting is going to be provided in each of the individual coaching calls. We kind of change the wording just so that way it's kind of different. But an example of this would be, hey, happy Tuesday. What's going well? What's working well right now? What's happening awesome? Like what awesome stuff happened in the last week? That's just an example of how we might potentially start it off. But that is how we start the 6-part structure of every single coaching call. So you can see here, even for you, as you start to think about how to deliver this 6-part structure within every single coaching call makes it very easy for you as a remote wellness practitioner as well, because you're like, okay, I actually know exactly what are the parts of this call, estimated times for every single part part of this call and exactly how the agenda is going to go for every single call. So it makes it easier for you, as well as it makes it easy for the student as well, as you're going to learn here in just a second. So that is part number 1. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and now talk about part number 2 of the 6-part structure. So part number 2 is going to go ahead and talk about challenges and obstacles. Estimated time around 5 to 7 minutes. Again, remember, estimated ballpark. And what is this? What we are doing now in the second part of the coaching call is that we're coaching the student on where they might be stuck, struggling, confused, or didn't follow through on the previous week's action steps, okay? And the reason we do this is because until we at least briefly address what happened last week, we can't really empty out the cup to be able to get ready for the new stuff that we're going to talk about in the upcoming week. And so that's why the second part of the coaching call focuses on the challenges and obstacles and at least briefly addressing those things, okay? Now, how do we do this? Again, the actual word-for-word scripting is going to change and depend on the actual coaching call, but an example of this would be, hey, the student says, I tried such and such recommendation and I had a really hard time with it, and here's why, right? And then you go ahead and address whatever that issue might have been. And so that is the second part of every single coaching call, which is addressing the challenges and the obstacles that the student had. Now, if we move on to the third part of this is all about new information, right? It's about the topic that is actually the coaching call is about. So in this case, you can see I've gone ahead and pulled up the example of the sleep topic, right? So this is where we would go ahead and introduce the new information regarding sleep. Now, you're going to notice that the estimated time for this is like 5 or 7 minutes. Again, remember, estimated, but you're like, dang, that's very short. I went through an entire seminar on new information around sleep. Like, what's going to happen here, right? This is what you got to know is that this is where you explain the new information, but only enough to keep the student engaged, excited, and learning. Bite-sized. This is the reason why it's so short. It's really bite-sized, okay? And so how we do this is that this is where most coaches and RWPs go wrong, is that they give away too much information because they get too excited, or they want to appear smart, or they want to appear like they're giving enough value or information or whatever, right? And so they think in their head more, and the student in their head is thinking overwhelm, okay? And so if we overload the student, we actually get the opposite of what we want. One of two things is going to happen. Either number one, the student's just going to nod and say, yeah, I want to be a good student, so I'm going to say that, yeah, I'm just nodding. But in their head, they're really thinking, yeah. How much longer is this person going to go on? Or number two, the person's going to get overwhelmed and they're going to disappear and drop out of the program, okay? And so what we're aiming for is we want to give enough information where the student has a basic understanding of the concept and they're inspired to take action, but not so much information that they get overwhelmed and stuck. And so this is going to be where you start to understand, wait a second, I went through an entire freaking seminar on sleep in module number 3 inside of the Remote Wellness Academy, and I'm only delivering one nugget. I'm only delivering a bite-sized piece of information here. Yes. And so that's where you will start to realize that your depth of understanding of these concepts was different because you were going through a certification versus the amount that your students are going to need to understand about these concepts is just enough so that way they can take action. Because remember, the goal of our program is to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. We want to go ahead and help them actually do the things that they are learning. It's not like a certification in which you guys learned it here in Remote Wellness Academy and you sat through all of this new learning. That's not what it is that you are going to be walking your students through. And so this is why I said earlier, even though this specific coaching call as an example is about sleep, your depth of understanding around sleep is so much more that you have like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transformation programs worth of understanding around sleep. You are literally like a PhD in sleep and you're just explaining the ABCs of sleep inside of your transformation program. And so even if a student stayed around with you for many more transformations in health alone, you would have enough understanding around sleep and the action steps around sleep and all of the depth of understanding of sleep that you would be able to provide that and include that in all of your upcoming transformation programs. Okay, so that is just an example of what it is that we're talking about when we talk about part number 3 of the actual 6 parts of your coaching calls. And again, remember the actual word for word scripting and the images and all of that kind of stuff, we are going to be providing for you that when we get to the specific coaching call and the training for the specific coaching call. Beautiful. So that is part number 3. Let's go ahead and now talk about part number 4 of the 6 parts of your coaching calls. And part number 4 is the experience exercise. Okay. Now the time for this does differ based on the trainings, but what it is that we're doing a short exercise within the coaching call that is related to the new information, right? So we just did the new information and then we go into the actual experience exercise. This is what actually transforms your coaching call from just giving information to actually creating an experience. Okay. And the reason we do this is because it is at this point, right? We've done the 5 or 7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of new information. Okay. Now we're switching into the experience. This experience section, this experience part of the coaching call is what allows you as the RWP to really dig in deeper and get into the change work. This is what allows you to emphasize the who you're becoming. This is what allows you to emphasize the becoming process. This is what allows you to emphasize the experience. So that way it helps the students stay motivated as well as allows them to actually implement and allow this to become a part of who they are becoming. Now, the actual how of this, again, the step-by-step is going to be specific to which coaching call we're talking about. But an example of this would be like, hey, the conscious eating, for example, right? You might help them take a couple breaths and you might do it live with them on the actual coaching calls. You might actually choose something together and show them what that looks like and then talk to them about how they are becoming somebody who actually slows down when they are eating. And so yes, the knowledge is cool, but it's the experience that helps makes the difference in the actual coaching call. And then from there, after part number 4, we move on to part number 5, which is the action steps. And so the action steps, what they are is that they're clear 1 to 3 empowered action steps that helps the student make sure that they are in action instead of overwhelmed, right? So now we've gone ahead and done the new information. We've gone ahead and done the experience exercise, right? This was the bulk of it right here. And then now as we close out the coaching call, we're moving into the action steps. Now the key here is not too many, otherwise the student's going to get overwhelmed. And number 1, they're either not going to do them the next week and they're going to feel like a failure, or number 2, they're just not going to come back because they feel so ashamed and embarrassed that they're not going to show up to their next coaching call because they're not a good student, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to make it clear. We want to make it very, very empowered, and we want to make it very simple for them. Remember all the coaching techniques we talked about? We learned about the strategies and the skills around making stupid, simple action steps. That's what we're talking about here, right? Because remember, small hinges open big doors, big issues require little changes, and little changes will take care of big issues. And the more change someone needs, the less they can handle. And then of course, the actual action steps are going to depend on a coaching call by coaching call basis. And we'll talk about that when we get into the actual scripting for them. But you're starting to see, okay, the beginning was the intro, right? Part 1 and part 2, what's going well, challenges and obstacles. And then we got into the meat of the actual coaching calls, which was new information and the experience exercise. And then the tail end of this is now part number 5, which is action steps. And then the last piece of this, which is part number 6, is ahas, takeaways, and appreciations. This is how we end every single coaching call. And this is where we go ahead and ask the student, hey, what was your biggest takeaway from this specific training, from this specific coaching call? And what this does is that it cements and instills the value of what was discovered in the actual coaching call, in the actual training, and it cements it for both you and the student. And it's also a great confidence boost for beginner RWPs who are really like wondering, man, am I actually making an impact in this student's life? And so it gives you that affirmation at the end of every single coaching call to say, wait a second, this person actually got something out of this call, which is amazing. And it goes ahead and starts that virtuous cycle for you to go ahead and give you more and more of that confirmation that you are actually making an impact in the student's life. See how cool this is, right? Like when you start to see all of these parts coming together and you're like, wait a second, this is exactly the structure of every single one of the coaching calls that I'm going to be delivering. And then on top of that, you're going to start to see a lot of similarities in the way that we actually structured the trainings within the Remote Wellness Academy as well. It's because we are actually practicing what we preach. Where did we get the idea of structuring our calls in this exact same way? We got this because of the fact that we practice what we preach, and we did this in the one-on-one environment, and now we actually just adapted it to the hybrid environment. Exactly the same way. Now, on that note, what I want to go ahead and talk to you about is why the 6 parts of each coaching call are so important, right? The reason why we're having the exact same structure within each coaching call and training is important is because it primes the student's brain to know exactly what to expect. Because when you have too much change or too much uncertainty or too much of a different structure every single coaching call, then what happens is that the human brain tends to kind of tense up and goes into limbic mode. And obviously we know we don't want that, right? right? However, when you actually have consistency and familiarity within each coaching call and within each training, what it does is it goes ahead and puts the student's brain and their limbic brain at ease. And so then the student knows that when they show up, every single time, it's going to be these 6 parts. Now, a prime example of this is if you look at how we have structured our trainings here in the Remote Wellness Academy, you're going to notice, hey, it's the exact same intro every single time, the same music every single time. I start the training off the exact same way every single time. Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, sound familiar? You almost get it so ingrained in your head that when you hear the music, you see the intro, you hear the introduction to that, hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, it's like it puts you in a certain state of mind because it's the same exact thing every single time. The training outline, same exact thing. The format of the training, same exact thing. Ending off each and every single training with the engagement questions and the action steps every single time. It's a lot of repetition because it calms and relaxes the student and it becomes easy for them to get into that state of mind in which they are accepting new information and change. And so once the student knows what to expect inside of every single coaching call and training, it allows them to more easily trust and relax in the process. And that's the reason why we have the same exact parts in every single training. And so I was not joking when I said that we practice what we preach, is because we've just modified this to the hybrid format. But even in the one-on-one format that you are going to be delivering with your students, you are doing the exact same thing. Because what it does is it calms the limbic brain. And even though the limbic brain wants to be on alert and be in defense mode, what it does is it calms it down and it allows it to go ahead and be accepting of all of the transformation that is going to be coming. Now, a quick note on this is I do want to go ahead and emphasize that this is something that you show, not tell, okay? This happens without you having to tell the student this, okay? You don't have to tell them, hey, okay, we're going to have 6 parts to every single call and this is what it's going to be like. No. The student is naturally going to start to feel the structure, right? They themselves, after a few coaching calls and trainings, are going to start to get a hang of the structure, okay? The student is going to know every single time that, okay, when I go ahead and start, when we get to the coaching call, when I get to the actual training, the coach is going to ask me what's going well. We're then going to go over obstacles. We're then going to go over new information. We're then going to do an exercise activity, right? We're going to go through that. All of a sudden, they understand that this is what's going to happen. It's the structure of predictability, stability, and no surprises. They feel safe because it's always the same thing. They're not stressed about the coaching call. They're not worried what's going to happen. They know what's going to happen every single time. Make sense? Very, very, very important to understand exactly why we are structuring every single one of these 6 coaching calls the same exact way every single time. Now, having said that, I'm going to go ahead and put the nail in the coffin here and say it one more time, is that I do want to go ahead and remind you so that way there is no confusion about this. Even though right now we are showing you this specific 6-part structure for the purposes of your practice modules that you are going to be going through inside of module 5, it does not mean that these 6 parts that we just went over are the Holy Grail, Bible, Quran, written in stone, entire thing that needs to happen for the rest of your life, okay? The point is to understand the principle of how successful training programs are designed. Successful training programs have a consistent structure behind them. That is the principle. Successful training programs all follow some sort of consistent structure that normally does include the 6 parts that we talked about, okay? And so our recommendation is to stick to these 6-part structures as much as possible, even in general when you design your own training modules after module number 5, okay? Because it does include everything that is going to be needed for you and your student. Now, does that mean that you have to stick to these 6 parts forever and ever and ever for the history of time, written in stone? That's it. This is how it has to be forever? No, it's just that this is our recommendation and what you are understanding of the principle behind it. So that way you are free in the future, not yet, remember, replicate before you iterate, but after you get through the practice calls and you understand the structure behind it, then you can go ahead and take this and be able to mold it because you now have experience through action because you replicated before you iterated. You now have the experience to understand, okay, now I can start to tweak all of this. And so that is why I wanted to go ahead and really make sure that there was no confusion about this, is that I don't want students taking these 12 coaching calls that we're going to be walking you through, and I don't want students to think that this is the end all be all. We do not want to take your ability to have creativity, your ability to have resourcefulness, your responsibility that is at the end of the day, these are your coaching calls. Yes, we're providing you the practice calls and the scripts and everything you're going to be providing to you to be able to go out there and find your voice and to be able to have your confidence. But at the end of the day, we want you to be able to have the resourcefulness so that way you can go out there and be successful with this, okay? And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the conclusion of the second part of this entire training, which was to understand why this training program works. What are the principles behind the practice calls that you are going to be practicing inside of this module? And so we talked about the arc and the principle of the arc and how successful training programs include an arc. We talked about anticipating enemy number one, how and why successful training programs anticipate enemy number one. We talked about embedded invitations and the coaching call structure as well. So initially, when you saw the initial spine of your 12 coaching calls, you're like, okay, I get it. Whatever. But at the same time, when you start to delve into this, you now understand, wait a second, there's an arc, there's self-sabotage that happens, and we're designing the program to protect the student from self-sabotage. We understand that there's embedded invitations. We understand every single coaching call has 6 parts within it. And so now you see, wow, this is actually an extremely deliberate and extremely conscious effort of actually designing a transformation program that is actually very, very, very in-depth and is not just something that's been thrown together. All of what it is that we talked about should only feed your conviction and your confidence as you start to learn each of these training modules and you understand how to deliver your transformation product. What's going to happen is that all of this is coming together in your mind and fueling that confidence and conviction that yes, I am able to transform someone's life, because this is not something that was just thrown together. This is something that has so much meticulous detail that I had to literally sit down through an entire 1 hour plus training just to freaking understand the details of why the training curriculum was structured the way the training curriculum is structured. And so all of this is starting to decimate any sort of imposter syndrome that you would have. And remember, we're not done yet. We're going to have an entire training on imposter syndrome. Don't even get me started when we actually get there. But what you are seeing is that this entire phase 1 of this program, this entire certification process, when I said that you will become ready through this process, I was not joking, because by the end of module 6, you will be so confident in that you are delivering a product that is so valuable, because you had to literally sit through this entire process of just understanding, wait a second, this is how the program is structured. And that is how you actually provide value, and you're understanding how the value is being provided. So that way you are offering to the marketplace something that is valuable, which is your ability to provide value. That is what the word means. And so that's what we are talking about here when we talk about the actual structure of the program and the reasons why this program is structured the way that it is, and why it's so different than just a to-do list or a bunch of activities. This is how your training modules contribute to the transformation process that is a part of your entire transformation product. I hope at this point, this is so 1000% clear for you. If you have any questions about this, make sure you let us know. But at the same time, don't overcomplicate this. I've said this many times, is that some students at this point want to overcomplicate things. And they want to make things like have a lot of questions and that kind of stuff. But remember, this was just an overview. A lot of your questions are going to get answered by the end of module 5. But at the same time, I want you to just be in the back of your head understanding the magnitude of what is happening here is that day by day, training by training, process by process, your imposter syndrome is being decimated to the point where you understand, wait a second, I am actually providing value to the marketplace. I'm not going to say it again, but I hope that is 100% clear. Now, with that being said, as we start to close out this part of the training, the next thing I want to go ahead and talk to you guys about is a warning, okay? About don't try to tweak the practice calls, okay? Because here's the thing. Once you make it through the practice calls inside of this module, can you tweak things? 100%. Absolutely. But for the purposes of the practice calls, we would recommend practicing as is. Why? Because like we talked about, replicate before you iterate. Starting a new career and doing these practice calls is hard enough. You do not need to try to create your own scripts, your own training modules, your own, magical transformation program before you can actually practice these calls, because you do not need to add that additional stress to the fact that, hey, I got to learn this new skill of how to be able to deliver these practice calls. Don't try to make it complicated for yourself, okay? You want to take what we are providing and you want to get practice finding your voice. And guess what? Naturally, when you actually go through these practice calls, even without you trying, you're going to find yourself making changes. You're going to find that the script that we provide inside of these coaching calls doesn't flow nicely. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to flow according to the way that you want it to flow. It doesn't sound as nice as you want it to sound. But guess what? That's because you don't yet have the repetition and the experience of holding the frame as the coach. And so you're going to find that as you are going through these coaching calls and as you're going through these practice calls, you're automatically going to be evolving them with your own example, with your own additions, ad-libbing here and there. And over time, it's going to become more and more of your own as you walk someone through it. And so our recommendation for all of this is do not try to think about, hey, how do I change these scripts right now? For the purposes of the practice calls, if you try to think about that, it's going to make your head hurt, okay? We would recommend just going ahead and following the directions, going through the practice calls, okay? And then as you're going through the practice calls, remember, as you're moving, as your car is moving, then you can steer it, right? And then as you're going through the practice calls, you're going to be able to find out what you like, what you don't like in your program, how is it coming off, how do you want to word it, all of that kind of stuff. It's not going to come from you sitting around and thinking about it. It's going to come from action. You cannot steer a parked car. Only when the car is moving can you steer it. Okay, so take what we're providing for you, take action, get into momentum, and then over time it will become yours. The biggest thing, this is the biggest recommendation that I can make, is that as you are going through the practice coaching calls, make sure that you are taking notes about what worked for you, what you liked, what you didn't like, all of those things, so that way by the time you get to the end of the practice, at the end of the module, you will have a massive list of per coaching call what you liked and what you didn't like, and so that way you can go ahead and tweak from there. Make sense? I hope that is 100% clear. Make sure you let us know if you have any questions about that. Awesome. Now, the other quick point that I do want to go ahead and mention and talk about here before we close out this section of the training is, but will my students find this valuable? Because as you go through these practice coaching calls, it's normal to have thoughts and feelings of, hey, I'm worried about the value that my students are going to see with this content, with this transformation, with this training modules, right? But I want you to remember, number one, your transformation program is more than just your training modules. Remember, there are 3 pillars to this, and we're just hyper focusing on one of those pillars, number one. And then number 2 is that the practice coaching calls that you will be delivering to your students are going to be different. The practice coaching calls that you have inside of module 5 and the scripting and the wording and the topics are all there just for practice. In fact, the training modules that you deliver to your students is actually going to be customized to each of your students. How? Via your student intake form. I don't know if you remember this, but when you joined the Remote Wellness Academy, you might remember that there was a student intake form. It might have looked something like this. Well, guess what? In typical RWA fashion, we are going to make sure that we over deliver for you, because there is going to be a breakthrough intake form that has already been created for you that is specific to remote wellness and to remote wellness practices, okay? And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and have you take it. Copy and paste. It's going to be given to you. And guess what? That intake form that you walk your students through is going to have a question specifically on there that looks like this. How much do you struggle with the following? So you can go ahead and have, hey, sleep, emotional eating, stress eating, food portions, movement, drinking water, energy levels, anxiety and burnout. Rate those: poor, needs work, good, excellent. And then guess what? When your student actually comes in to your transformation program, they are going to tell you what it is that they struggle with the most. And so you will be able to shift your training modules around in the one-on-one model in the way that best suits the specific student that you're going to be working with. And so, like I said earlier, this is different compared to the one-on-one model, compared to the hybrid model, because in a one-on-one setting, because you are just delivering the coaching calls, you're able to go ahead and restructure the coaching calls because you have practice with all of them. You can restructure the coaching calls, add and remove and edit and all that kind of stuff according to the needs of the specific student that you have. And so, yes, you will even be able to edit all of the categories and the templates that we provide for you in the intake form, so that way you can go ahead and tweak it to whatever way that you want. And so in this way, in the one-on-one model, you are able to go ahead and have this be so much more valuable to the end student. But for the purposes of Module 5 and for the purposes of the practice coaching calls that you are going to be delivering, they are there only for practice, so that way you can work on finding your voice, okay? And so then after that, it is going to become so much more valuable for your student. This is why I am including this section right here, is because again, I do not want you to judge the practice calls and say, oh, I don't see the value of them. The point of the practice calls and the coaching calls in Module 5 is not to make them valuable. The point of the practice calls in Module 5 is for you to practice finding your voice, to build the confidence of you speaking about these topics out loud, okay? And then all of this is going to come together, and this is why I wanted to provide that sneak peek for you right here, right now. How cool is that, right? This is how all of that is actually going to come together. And so yes, our objective here at the Remote Wellness Academy is to give you everything that you need in order to be successful with this period. No stone left unturned. And we really hope that dedication that flows within every single ounce of this entire organization, every single team member, every single coach, every single support staff that we have at Remote Wellness Academy, our one singular North Star mission is to over-deliver to our students. As Robin said, holy over-delivery, Batman, RWA is amazing. It's because we want to strive that the value that you get from the Remote Wellness Academy always far exceeds the investment that you make in it, okay? This is so absolutely important to us because our mission here at Remote Wellness Academy is to create the most results-oriented education program on the planet. Why? Because we at Remote Wellness Academy believe that education is power. Education is what is going to make the world a better place. Education is what provides light to those who are in complete darkness. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is what our mission here at Remote Wellness Academy is, and this is why we strive to over-deliver again and again and again to our students. But the problem with this is that no matter where you look in the entire world, the school system is broken. Is the school system outdated? Yes, the US education system is currently outdated. Oh, but that's the US education system. What about the rest of the world? Canada's education system is failing. What about the UK system? UK system is failing. Whether you look at the East, whether you look at the West, whether you look at the North, whether you look at the South, the point is that the bottom line is that the current education system, the current school system is broken. School has failed society. How do we know this? Because we spent over $300,000 of our own money over the last decade purchasing education, both in traditional education and online education, to be able to actually understand this purposefully. Not only were we born and raised having gone through the education system, and we had to unlearn so much of it, not only that, in fact, I myself, Yasin, spent over $30,000 on getting an MBA from the University of Texas. Not because I needed it. In fact, when I actually went through and got my MBA from the University of Texas, my business was actually doing over $100,000 a month when I actually went into their program. But the reason I went in and got my MBA was simply because I wanted to learn and see what the school system was doing and if what they were providing was actually valuable. And guess what I found? I found that it was completely useless in the real world. And not only that, it's not only the formal traditional education system that is completely broken that we've realized over the last decade, 2 decades that we've been doing this and providing education and transformation to students. Not only that, this also goes for 99.99% of the online courses being sold by the Buy My Online Course gurus, right? Be successful like me and take my online course as I sit in front of of a Lamborghini that I either bought or that I rented, right? The other $270,000 that we spent plus was spent on courses online. And what did we find? We found that the vast majority of those online courses that are being sold by the gurus were half-baked, half-effort programs put together by an influencer to make money. So for some RWA students, you guys might be nodding with me right now. For other RWA students, RWA is the first program that you've ever invested in. And so for you, you don't have anything else to compare this to. For those students who RWA is their first investment, they don't know what it's like out there. And so this is what I want to go ahead and make clear to you, is if RWA is the first program that you have ever invested in, I would urge you to speak to the other RWA students who have spent thousands of dollars into other programs, and I want you to listen to them about why RWA has been different for them. Because ultimately, this is the reason why the RWA over delivery promise exists. We are dedicated to you as our students, and we hope that comes across throughout our entire program. However, most importantly, this is not only so that way you can say, oh, hey, RWA is amazing. This is the most important thing I want you to walk away from this is that we hope that what you are learning throughout this program is not only what we are teaching, right? It's not only about these trainings, but it's also about how we are delivering it. Because your education, career, income source, your education business, your transformation program, your remote wellness practice, all of that, right? It's not any different than ours. We're all in the same business of transformation and education. And so if you have the question, hey, will my students find what it is that I'm going to be providing valuable? What I want you to learn from RWA is not only what we are doing to help you, but also how we are doing all of this to help you. Because that way you can learn a tremendous amount of knowledge that is in between the lines that I can't put inside of trainings because it would be hundreds and hundreds of hours of trainings. In fact, if I just told you what it is that we were doing, it wouldn't be as impactful as if I actually showed it to you. And so that is the bottom line, and that's what's most important, is that yes, we are dedicated to you as our students, but I want you to learn how we are doing that. I want you to learn how you are going to do that for your students as well. And so that is exactly why all of this is so valuable, not only for you, but also for your students as well. In fact, just to prove my point and just to prove the point that I'm making here in terms of how valuable this program is and how much value that we are aiming to deliver for you as our students and what you can learn from that, what I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and shift gears, and at the tail end of this training, as we start to close out this training, I want to go ahead and talk to you about a little bit of a different topic, which is about how to remove yourself from the one-on-one product, okay? And the reason why I want you to go ahead and understand this, and I want you to kind of imagine like, okay, this was the training, it just ended, and now we're talking about a different topic. The reason I want you to be able to understand this is because I want you to see how much value you are getting from the Remote Wellness Academy and how all of this is going to come together in the long term, so that way you have a complete picture of all of this. And so that is why we're going to go ahead and talk about this topic of removing yourself from the one-on-one product. So we've gone ahead and talked about the one-on-one product. We've talked about the 12 coaching calls. We've talked about the 12 trainings that you're going to be delivering, right? That is your one-on-one product. That is what you are going to be busy with for a long time, all right? So don't even get ahead of yourself and think, okay, how am I actually going to remove myself from this? However, the reason why I am putting these final notes at the very end of this training is so that way I can go ahead and plant seeds, so that way you have something to look forward to. Because what's going to happen is that as you are actually delivering these one-on-one transformations, and you're delivering these one-on-one coaching calls, what's going to happen in the back of your head is you're going to say, man, how long am I actually going to have to do this? Is this it? Is this what my life is going to look like? Am I just going to be doing one-on-one transformations for the rest of my life? Now, right now, you're excited. Right now, you're saying, yeah, I can't wait to go ahead and deliver this, right? But then when you actually start delivering one-on-one transformations, you're going to say, man, what's next? How do I actually transcend this? How do I actually get to the next level? And this is why at the end of this training, I want to go ahead and talk to you about what it looks like next. I want to talk to you about what it looks like down the road, not yet, but down the road, what it looks like for you to be actually remove yourself from the one-on-one product. Because if you remember, in a previous training titled The Evolution of an RWP, we talked about the importance of not skipping steps inside of your journey as a remote wellness practitioner, right? We said, if you remember, inside of that training, that you are going to be starting off with the one-on-one model, right? We said we're going to start off with the one-on-one model because number one, it's the easiest to sell, it's the easiest to provide transformation, it's the easiest to have students stay on longer with you, it's the easiest to learn, and it's the easiest to start going ahead and making money quickly, right? These are all of the reasons. I'm not going to go into the details of it. We already touched base on it in a different training, in a previous training, but these are all the reasons we said that we're starting off with the one-on-one model first, right? And so even though the one-on-one model does have issues with scale, even though we are going to be spending more time and there is more manual work with the one-on-one model. Because you are just starting out, that is why you are starting with the one-on-one model, okay? And so even with all of these cons, it is still the number one place for beginners to start, period, okay? And this was the visual representation that we used inside of that previous training, right? So even though, yes, I completely acknowledge, I'm with you on that. Even though we are designing this entire process for you to go through, we understand that you as a beginner are not going to be able to just jump to hybrid transformations. It's not going to happen, and I'm going to explain to you why it's not going to happen again in just a second. But as a beginner, even with all of those cons, you are going to be starting with one-on-one. This is very important for you to understand. And just to make sure that I can really put the nail in the coffin here and really just dispel any limiting beliefs or any kind of things that are coming to anybody's mind about this, I want to go ahead and rehash with you where new RWPs go wrong, okay? Because this is what you have to understand. Online and hybrid are the hardest to provide transformation in, okay? Online and hybrid, right? One-on-one, I'm going to go ahead and go back up here real quick, right? There's one-on-one, group, online, and hybrid, okay? Online and hybrid are the hardest to provide transformation in. Why? Because you have no feedback from the student. You're literally teaching through a video. You don't know if the words that you are saying have an impact on the student or not. And because you have not had enough exposure or experience to what the transformation process looks like, you have not heard, seen, or solved enough difficult problems for your students. And so it's hard for you to be able to transform their lives via online and hybrid programs because you have no idea what issues, obstacles, or challenges that you are going to have to help them through. And so this is where many new RWPs go wrong. They try to jump directly to the hybrid model too soon, and they come into the Remote Wellness Academy and they say, okay, great. I'm just going to go ahead and skip one-on-one because I don't have time for one-on-one, right? Now, not only is it impossible for you to succeed that way, but on top of that, you'd be a complete fraud, right? Because I understand, like we talked about just a second ago, we understand the limitations of scale with one-on-one. However, your goal in the beginning is to lay the foundations for yourself. I need you to be able to think bigger picture. Even if your time is limited, okay, and you can only take on a handful of students, those handful of students are going to teach you more than you could ever imagine. It's difficult in the beginning with one-on-one, and that's the point, okay? You will learn skills, character traits, and beliefs that are needed for you to be successful in this career, in business, and in life. All of that is going to be learned as a result of you going through that difficult process of one-on-one, okay? Because the truth is this, students who wear the failure uniform can't stick to anything. They jump around at the first sight of resistance. And so one-on-one is going to teach you to be able to have grit and to be able to learn how to be able to stick with things when it gets hard. So that way you can actually push through. And that is the skill set that people have who make over $1 million a year. And that is a skill set that you are going to acquire through the process of going through one-on-one. When you actually acquire the skill of consistency, of sticking through something, that is the skill set that those people that you look at that are advanced, it's not that advanced. They just have that basic skill set, okay? And so this is why we call this your Rocky cutscene. You can imagine, in Rocky the movie, there's always that piece where he's getting ready for the fight and he's doing he's doing sit-ups upside down and he's going through all that difficulty and he's running up the stairs and all that kind of stuff, right? This is your Rocky cutscene. It's at that period of time where you're making 50, 60, 70, maybe even up to $250,000 a year doing one-on-one, right? But you're going through this grind. You're learning all of the skills that is going to allow you to be able to make $1 million plus. But unless you go through that process first, you will never get to the millions. And so the reason why I Coach Yasin. I can literally jump on here and I can make these trainings, and these trainings are so transformational is because I've spoken to hundreds and thousands of students one-on-one over the years. I've gone through these stages, right? So how come I can literally be behind the screen right now and still talk to you, right? I'm talking to you right now, and you might be watching this training on airplane, you might be at home, you might be at a coffee shop, you might be in the United States, you might be in Canada, you might be in any other country in the world, right? It might be morning, it might be evening. But how come the words that I am saying can impact you? How come I can actually talk to your mind through this training, right? How come so much of these trainings are so helpful? The reason why that is the case is because I've done the one-on-one. I've gotten feedback from the one-on-one. I've seen the impact of the words that I am speaking to you right now on the faces of the students that I have taught over and over and over again. I have seen the impact in whether or not what I am saying has landed with the student or not. And so when I first started, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be dead honest with you. When I first started, I would literally have to change my shirt after every single coaching call because of how much I was sweating. I'm an introvert, believe it or not. And so in the beginning, when I started, I was nervous as heck. I had no idea what I was doing. I was sweating like a crazy madman, right? And at the same time, a lot of what I was saying was not getting a lot of good feedback. I would say words, right? Even though I would create an outline for myself, even though I would script out word for word what I should say, right? Even then, how I was saying it, the tonality of how I was saying it, every single thing, the entire interaction, I was terrible at it. But over time, I refined, and I refined. And it was only possible because I was able to get instant feedback in that one-on-one environment, and I stuck to the process. I was able to see the facial reactions and the impact of my words right there and then, live with the student directly in front of me. Because right now, right, I'm talking to you right now through this training. I can't see you. I can't see your facial reactions, but I know what facial reactions you're going to have based off of my experience, based off of the fact that I've already seen the impact of these words on so many students in the past. And so this entire process of one-on-ones has taught me the character traits of patience, commitment, hard work, and consistency. This is why I am able to have bulletproof confidence, conviction, and belief when I actually make these trainings, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that when I say these words with this tonality and explain these concepts in this way, it is going to have this specific transformation to these students. Why? Again, because I've already seen it live. The feedback loop was very, very quick and very, very short when I did it live with students. And guess what? It's not just me. I'm not special, okay? Every single one of our team members and coaches here at RWA has gone through hundreds of transformations over the years as well. None of us are special. All we did was we stuck through the process and had a lot of repetition. And so this is the key to remember. It happened through the process. When you stick with it and you do the dang work, okay? So through the process of action and work, it molds you, it shapes you into becoming someone completely different. So just keep on pushing through the process. I'm going to say this again. You may not be ready now, but through the process of action, work, and consistency, you will become ready. You will become someone who can effortlessly do and create a hybrid training program and still create amazing transformation because you put in the work beforehand. So don't be afraid of one-on-one. It's the best way to learn. You get in there with the student, you talk to them, you learn things, and then before you know it, you'll be moving on to the hybrid model, and you're going to have a skill set that will allow you to make money for the rest of your life. So very, very, very important to remember and keep in mind. This is where you are going to get started here in the one-on-one model. So don't try to skip ahead, okay? This is a process, but having said that, the reason why I'm reminding you of this right now is because I do have a surprise for you. There is something that I do want to go ahead and introduce for you, because I want to go ahead and give you a sneak peek to have something to look forward to, because I can't just tell you, hey, just do one-on-one and then we'll talk about hybrid. I want to give you a sneak peek that is actually tangible, so that way you can actually understand what's coming down the road. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. What happens after I've actually built up my skill set? Well, at RWA, we define building up your skill set once you've taken at least 10 students through your 12-week one-on-one program. Okay, now notice, this does not say 10 students at 1,200. This does not say 10 students at 2,400. This does not say 10 students at 3,600. It does not matter what the price point that you sold the person in at is, right? For getting better at sales, yes, the price point matters, right? If you're like, hey, I want to get better at closing sales and the reps at 3,600, that's for sales. I'm not talking about sales right now. I'm talking about the experience for you as an RWP. It's just a matter of taking 10 students through the program, period. Okay. So it doesn't matter if they were like $1,200 students or they were even practice students. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you actually took 10 students through the process. Now, why 10? Because 10 is the number that we've seen that at that point, you start to be able to deliver the coaching calls in your sleep, right? It helps become effortless for you, right? Then what do? At that point, after you've taken 10 students through your 12-week one-on-one program, at that point, you're able to go ahead and jump to the hybrid model, okay? And remember, we've talked about the details of the hybrid model, so I'm not gonna go into all of that inside of this training, but the hybrid model is really where you go ahead and unlock things like unlimited scale, benefit of group dynamics, higher student retention, and all of the other benefits of the other models, and almost none of the negatives. And so once you've delivered enough one-on-one sessions, enough one-on-one coaching calls, enough one-on-one trainings, right? This is where the fun starts. Why? Because now that you have the experience and the skills, you can start to take the same trainings that you were doing one-on-one, and guess what you can do? You can start recording them. And then guess what happens when you start recording them? You then take those same trainings, those recorded trainings, and you put them into a classroom, a training portal. And so in the start, you can even do a little bit of a hybrid. You can have some one-on-ones and you can have some recorded. And so now all of a sudden, you are starting to transition and remove yourself from one-on-one and get into the hybrid model. And then eventually, you have an entire library of recorded trainings that you can take the student through and completely remove yourself from one-on-one. But then here's the thing. You might have a question. You say, but Coach Yasin, I'm not as talented, right? I can't make these images or these explanations the way that you do. I don't know if I could do that. Okay, that's fair. So you're saying that you think that you might struggle making the images and the documents the way that we have here in the Remote Wellness Academy. Is that right? Okay, well, I have a question for you. What if after you get your 10 students and you walk them through your one-on-one program and you gain the experience and the skills that you needed to have your Rocky cutscene, right? You can't skip that. You got to make sure you have your Rocky cutscene. Very, very important. You got to make sure you learn the character traits, the beliefs, and the skills. Very important. But what if after you do that, what if we just gave you all of the images and all of the documents and all the stuff that you've already been going through here in RWA? What if we just gave you all the documents already created for you to just go ahead and start recording your hybrid program after you take 10 students through your one-on-one program? Huh? What's going on here? Coach Yasin, what are you saying? Coach Yasin, you'd give us all of your documents and all of the trainings that we went through here in the Remote Wellness Academy that literally the RWA team spent over 10 years perfecting and creating? You can see these documents, all of this stuff that you've gone through inside of the program so far. This wasn't just like, hey, we woke up one day and it was done. You can see the amount of meticulous effort in terms of the images, in terms of the explanations, in terms of the wording, in terms of the frames. This was not something that was just, hey, we just woke up and decided to go ahead and create this training program. This has taken us over 10 years to be able to perfect and put together. Well, guess what? What if we just gave you all of those documents and trainings and images and headlines and action images and training images? What if we just gave you all of that? You heard me right. What if we just gave you all of the training for you to record when you actually got to the hybrid level? Yeah. What if we gave you a lifetime license to a select number of special Google documents for you to actually use in your remote wellness practice when you get your 10 students through your program and you get to the hybrid level? The images, the text, the frames, like I said, the action images, the training images, everything that you went through. What if we just gave you a special version of it? Go ahead. It's yours. Take it. Would you be okay with that? I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that you wouldn't be opposed to us giving you literally everything. You wouldn't be upset if we did that, right? I just want to make sure that you wouldn't be upset and say, hey, Coach Yasin, you've literally saved me years and years of agony and pain of having to create all of these documents, having to create all these images, and having to do all this myself. You've literally saved me all of that. I'm very upset with you. I just want to make sure that you wouldn't be upset with us if we did that. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Maybe you think I'm joking. I'm telling you straight up right now. Get 10 one-on-one students to go through your 12-week program, and we will hook you up. Period. I am not joking with you, okay? And in fact, just to prove this to you, I have a special surprise for you inside of this training. Let me show you one of our more advanced students and how he has been able to remove himself from the one-on-one model. What I want to show you is what his hybrid classroom looks like. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce to you what he calls the Metabolic Reset Academy. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and cut over to a mini training, a quick mini training that's going to show you a hybrid classroom preview and show you the power of what it looks like once you actually get to that point. Again, remember, you're not skipping here directly. You're probably going to be on one-on-one for quite some time. But the reason I'm planting these seeds is so that way you can understand what it looks like when you start to remove yourself from one-on-one, okay? So let's go ahead and cut over to that quick mini training and show you what a hybrid classroom example looks like. So let's go ahead and cut over to that right now. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about the hybrid classroom preview. All right, so before I go ahead and show you what this is and what this looks like, a couple quick points. Number one, only after one-on-one. I've said this a gazillion times. Remember, what I'm about to show you is from an advanced student. He was only able to pull off what it is that I'm about to show you after he gained enough experience and skills of what it is like to coach in a one-on-one environment. He was able to do this because he has the confidence and belief because he has already coached people before. This is not something that he just rolled up and said, you know what, first time around, I'm just going to make a hybrid program. That's number one, all right? Number two, do not steal from us. Otherwise, you will get in trouble, okay? As I show you this, as I'm about to show you what I'm about to show you right now, I want you to remember there is an agreement in place to license all of this material. I'm going to walk you through that agreement later on inside of this module. Just because I'm about to show you what this student was able to put together is not permission for you to go out and plagiarize our RWA classroom. The student who created the classroom that I'm about to show you has explicit permission and licensing rights given to him by Remote Wellness Academy. Okay, so any student who is caught outright copying our content without permission and without a licensing agreement in place is going to be in violation of the student agreement and is going to be committing copyright infringement and intellectual property theft. Okay, so don't be the student who wears a failure uniform and does dumb things and ruins your reputation, your own career, and not to mention your relationship with us and get into major legal and financial issues. Okay, so in an upcoming training, like I said, I will be walking you through how you are going to be getting permission and license to utilize specific content that we provide to you with your students, so that way you don't have to worry about creating any images or any trainings from scratch, okay? But I urge you to go ahead and wait for that instruction and just don't go out there and start stealing from our classroom and all that kind of stuff, okay? And then number three, how to access this hybrid classroom preview, okay? So you see, I have it pulled up here on the left side, and what you're going to have to do is that we are going to be providing you with a magic link. However, this classroom, this hybrid classroom that I'm about to show you is hosted on the same platform that RWA is hosted on. And so what you are going to have to do is that you are not going to just be able to click on the link and then open it up. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to copy the link, okay? So you're gonna have to copy it right there, copy. And then you go into your browser, you're going to go ahead and click on new incognito window, just so that way it doesn't mess up with your cookies for your current magic link, okay? And then once you click on that, it's going to pop up into an incognito window like that. Then you go over here and you paste, boom, enter. And then when you do that, then you will go ahead and be able to access this preview of a classroom, okay? And so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and cut over and show you this and walk you through what this actually looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and walk you through this classroom and this hybrid classroom so you can see what it's going to look like for a hybrid program to come together. Now, off the bat, you're going to notice and you're gonna say, wait a second, this looks very, very, very similar to the Remote Wellness Academy. Because of the fact that we've already gone ahead and licensed and given permission to the student to literally go ahead and use a lot of the material, right? And so you're going to say, wait a second, Metabolic Reset Academy? This looks all very, very, very familiar. How would you like it if we literally pretty much built the entire program out for you on the exact same platform that the Remote Wellness Academy classroom is built off of? Now look over here. If I go over here to all modules, very similar to what it is that you go through inside of the Remote Wellness Academy, you're going to say, wait a second, a lot of this looks very, very similar. And so you're going to notice licensed images, licensed training titles, licensed format of action steps, licensed images within trainings, licensed content and Google Documents, same and similar concept to what you are going through inside of the Remote Wellness Academy, just broken up and expanded. So let me show you what we mean by this, right? So if we go over here to the sleep training, right? So you went through the sleep training, but in this hybrid classroom, what the student has been able to do, because of the fact that we have given him permission to license the content out, is that he's gone ahead and taken that same sleep training, the exact same training that was licensed to him, and broken it up into multiple trainings, okay? So now you have a sleep module. So versus inside of the Remote Wellness Academy, sleep is a training within a module, which was within module 3. What he's done is he's gone ahead and broken it up and sleep into its own separate module. And so you're going to notice on here, check this out, right here, action steps. Look familiar? Because all of it has been licensed to him right here. All of it looks similar, right? And then if I go ahead and play, check this out. Oh snap, wait a second. This looks familiar as well. The intro has also been licensed out. Look at that. Wow, really, really cool. Same exact format, same Google document. It's just his voice narrating through the entire Google document that has been licensed to him. Same exact thing. We teach you how to do it step by step by step, so that way you're able to remove yourself from the one-on-one model. And so a lot of this stuff is going to look similar and familiar to you because all of it is just taking module 2 and 3 and breaking it up and expanding it. And so this is what an example of a hybrid classroom looks like when everything has been licensed out to you. Is that later on down the road, again, I'm not joking with you, is later on down the road, once you actually get to that point where you have earned the right to do the hybrid model, we will take care of you. Again, don't go out there and try to steal from us right now because you have to make sure that you go through the process. But once you actually go through the process, you will be able to have all of the material, the images, the Google documents, everything licensed to you. So that way you do not have to create it from scratch. And then all of a sudden you've removed yourself from the one-on-one environment and you've been able to scale to the hybrid model. And so this is just an example of what I wanted to show you. And we are going to go ahead and provide for you this exact magic link. So you can go in and be like, wow, have your mind blown with what is actually going to be down the road for you if you do this process properly, and how you're going to be able to remove yourself from the one-on-one model and have a classroom pretty much identical and very similar to the one that we have, except the only difference is that yours is going to be specific to the content that you are going ahead and providing the transformation in, which is all of the health stuff, which is the brain stuff, all that kind of stuff, right? And then it's not going to be the certification the way that we have it inside of our classroom. So again, this is just what I wanted to show you. Just take note of that. It is going to be an action step for you to go through, just to go ahead and plant those seeds and get you excited for what is possible and what is to come. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop back over to the main training. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the main training. Pretty cool, huh? I told you I wasn't joking around, right? When I told you that once you get your 10 one-on-one students to go through your program, we will hook you up, period. And so your action step for this specific training, okay, is that I want you to spend at least 15 minutes going through the hybrid classroom preview. We're going to give you a magic link to that exact one, okay? I want you to go ahead and spend some time going through this, and I want you to see what's possible for your transformation product. Now that you've gone through the 12 training calls, the 12 coaching calls that you're going to be going through inside of your one-on-one program, I want you to see the bigger picture here, okay? I want you to start seeing what it's going to look like once you've gotten your 10 students through your one-on-one program, okay? This is how you are going to be able to remove yourself from the one-on-one model and not have a bottleneck on your product, okay? Because what's going to happen is that your training videos are going to be taking your students through the transformation 24/7, day and night, without you having to be involved. But, and that's a big but there, okay? It's a privilege. All of what we're talking about is a privilege that must be earned. 10 students through your one-on-one program. And so I would urge you, put in the dang work even when you face resistance. The quote that I love that I always say here is be uncomfortable now so that way you can be comfortable later. Do not do it the opposite way. Do not do it the other way around, okay? So make sure that you do that effort consistently enough, because when you do that, you will then be ready for hybrid and you will be ready for these seeds that we've gone ahead and planted for you. So put in the dang work And that way you will get there before you know it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, as we start to close out this training, couple quick notes on here. 3 documents for each training. So as we walk through the rest of this module, there are going to be 3 documents that are going to be presented for you for each of your coaching calls. You're going to have the RWA training guide, which is the normal guide that's in every single training. That's what you can expect. However, there's also going to be a coaching call word for word script, as well as a training guide that is going to be available for your students that you can give to them as well, with all the images and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm not going to walk you through that right now, but we are going to be walking you through that in the upcoming trainings. Okay, other quick mentions on here, real quick mention number 1. Remember the transformation outcome. What's the transformation? Helping them be able to do this for the rest of their life by themselves. Okay, so we want to always make sure we are focusing on the desired situation. Quick mention number 2, will there be recordings? We are in the process right now of removing confidential student information from coaching call examples. And so there are going to be recordings for you for each of the coaching calls. If there are no recordings there yet, they will be there shortly. Okay, quick mention number 3, you are not selling dang coaching calls. Don't forget this. I'm going to say this a gazillion times until it's pounded into your head. You are always selling the desired situation and pricing based on the value of that. Even though we are zooming in to a part of your product, which is the training, which is the coaching calls, do not make the mistake to think that this is your product. It is only one piece of your product offer, which is your bundle. So again, do not forget this. And then finally, quick mention number 4, can I tweak it? Remember, this is not going to be maybe exactly your style. Don't worry. You are going to have the opportunity to change this. This is an awesome book, Steal Like an Artist. If you want to go ahead and pick it up, it's pretty cheap. It talks similarly about this. If you look at how all the top artists, Picasso, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, how they taught their students is they always copy first and then they made it their own. Duplicate what you're given first and then make it your own. You have to earn that right, okay? And so once you've copied it and you've actually taken and put it into action, it will naturally and effortlessly infuse with your own personality and become unique and your own over time. The entire RWA classroom is a testament to this. We have learned from so many people over the years, and we didn't just copy and then steal it. We first learned from them, and then with their permission, we implemented it inside of our business. We implemented it inside of our remote wellness practice. We implemented it on ourselves. And then naturally, what ended up happening was that as we were implementing it, eventually with repetition, it became our own and it became unique because it automatically changed. And so again, don't worry. We're going to walk you through the licensing process so that way in an upcoming training, you can legally be protected. So that way we give you permission legally to be able to use this, okay? And then over time, when you are using what we have given you, it will naturally become a part of your own, okay? So that is the training on your training modules. Let's go ahead and talk about your engagement question for this specific training. Go ahead and let us know inside of the student community. Hey, what are your thoughts about this training? I know we went through a lot. There was a lot of dense information. You might even have to actually go through this training a couple times, maybe go through the guide of this training to make sure that you cement all of this. But go ahead and let us know, hey, what were your thoughts on this training? What did you like and enjoy about this training? How does it feel seeing how the pieces are starting to come together? And what were some of your biggest takeaways or ahas from this training? Please go ahead and make sure you give us a full-fledged answer, because that way it helps you and it helps us get feedback as well. And then finally, your action steps for this specific training. There are 3 of them. Number 1, watch and study this training in full. Number 2, make sure you do complete the engagement question from this training, the one that we went ahead and talked about above. And then, this is different. Number 3, explore the hybrid training classroom example and start to see what's possible with your transformation product in the future once you get through your 10 one-on-one students and you develop the skill set of hard work, persistence, and patience and being able to get through that rocky cutscene and what it's going to look like when you actually get to the hybrid transformation model. So with that being said, this has been this training on your training modules. This is Coach Yasin checking out, and I will catch you inside of the next training.